Shock podcast. Today we are joined just by two members of the team. I'm Dan and I'm here with Jerd.
How's it going? What's the crack? How are you getting on?
I'm okay, mate. I'm okay. So, big movie that came out this week was Uncharted. Long in development movie, which has actually been so long in development that Mark Wahlberg was originally cast as Drake, and it's been so long in the works that he's now aged into the Sully role and Tom Holland's Drake, which I still think is horrible casting, but
it's still weird too because Tom Holland is such a baby. Like then they just I'm aware there's flashbacks in the game, but still I don't even think is he that young in the game.
He is in very slim sections of the game, but I don't know. From what I've heard, I've not seen the film, but from what I've heard, it is more set up for. I think the next movie will be like the first game. Do you know what I mean? I think this is the kind of how him and Sully meet and how they kind of learn to trust each other. Because by the time you play the first game, Sully and Drake's relationship's established and stuff. By then. So yeah, they've kind of built. I mean, the game's kind of built retroactively Drake's past, and obviously the movies are just starting with Drake's past. Because I mean, in the games we didn't even know he had a brother until the fourth game, whereas in the movie, right off the bat, you get introduced to his brother. So they've kind of capitalised on the fact that the story's already been laid out by Naughty Dog, and they can be like, right, let's tell it in order and go for the start. But from all accounts I've heard, it's just a movie. Like, it's not great and it's not terrible. It's just a movie.
Yeah,
it's like a 5 or a 6 out of 10. It's just middle of the road.
Yeah, a friend of mine seen it yesterday. Said he really liked it, and then I just watched a couple, maybe I only watched the one review. Don't know if I mentioned them before. The Double Toasted guys, two American guys. Right. Or no, the crew. There's a whole crew with them, but they seen it and they were like, "I heard this load of shit." Just like trying to sell it, because like they kind of put it as like it's kind of like a fuck you to the fans, and like that's the fans of the game that got the fucking film. Have that interest here to have the film made. They did have one of the guys on it has an interesting point where it was like, it's a really cinematic game. You're kind of it's like. It's really what did they say? It's like masturbatory to be like making another one, but like it's kind of you're setting yourself up for a difficult because like any game, like my nephew's a massive gamer, and like he'd always tell me about the story and stuff. And for a long time, I was like, fucking stories and games aren't really much. They're serviceable, but it's more about you interacting with the story. And if the game is already doing that and manages to do that in a good way, where it's an enjoyable game, but also the story is good. You have a lot of work for yourself to put it into a film. I think this will apply to all games like that or adaptions that we're going to talk about.
I would actually side with the opposite. I've always played games for the story. I play games because I want to experience interesting story. The gameplay for me, and I'm in the minority when it comes to hardcore gaming people. Most folk, gameplay is king. That's like a phrase, across game development and game fans. Like, gameplay is king. For me, gameplay is great, but I will happily suffer through the tank controls of Metal Gear Solid because I love the story. Do you know what I mean? And to me, that kind of, I don't mind suffering that in order to experience something memorable. Don't get me wrong. Games like Call of Duty Warzone or Rocket League, which there's no story and it's just having fun with your mates. Like I can appreciate games that are just pure gameplay and that's all there is to it. I'm not saying they're all bad. I have enjoyed my time in games like that. But for me, I prefer single player, coming in after a long day at work, sitting my arse and just experience a single player story. Like that is my favourite kind of way to experience a game. Personally.
Yeah, I guess I am kind of like. I think it's for me is that the story is stupid that takes me out of the game, and even when I think of it there, like I was trying to play one of the Far Cry's, I think it was Far Cry 3, and you get this fucking like when you get new skills, you just get this like magical tattoo, and you're like, what the fuck does it like? Fuck off! Like make me a robot or whatever, or a cybernetically enhanced person, but getting a magical tattoo like that shit, and like that would arguably have great gameplay, but I was like, this is fucking bullshit, like. And I know. So I do. I think it's like I don't think a game has to have an amazing story, but as long as the story doesn't detract from like having stupid shit like that in it, that can detract from me. But as long as it's like you can have the bare bones of a film, but of something that I appreciate for a film, but.
Well, I think though you were onto something there. What you were saying about how games have become so cinematic that it does kind of make you wonder: is there a reason to still pursue a movie adaptation, like a cinematic adaptation. I mean, that was my whole take away from the Resident Evil film that came out, which was garbage. The set, everything else in the film was right, but if you want to experience a Resident Evil cinematic story, play Resident Evil 2 Remake, because it's way more cinematic than the movie, and as you're saying, you get to experience it, so that adds a whole extra layer. It's like games at this point have gotten so cinematic that it's like, do we need to justify ourselves in making it into a movie? Like, is it not okay just to make a cinematic experience as a game? But money, at the end of the day, it's all about money, and that's why these adaptations get put through.
Because they're going to just like remake something, like you could, like, if the game, like, say, if, for example, like, jump ahead slightly, but just as an example, like God of War, like, not that I've even played that much of the PlayStation 4 one, but I've been playing bits of it. Like, that's a big part of that is its story, and I guess The Last of Us. So I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but we can go into more specifically later. But they have like good gameplay and really good story. But then if you're trying to do that again in a film, you're like, am I just going to retell this? Am I going to go a little bit of a different direction? Like, it's like, say with the comic book films, they don't really recreate stuff step for step. Now, apparently, and I only watched it there for the first time, Shazam. That apparently, there was a Shazam run just before that film came out that apparently it's nearly beat for beat the film. So, like, someone was on about, like, if you... Actually, it was... Mr. Sunday Movies was saying, when I went back and listened to the review, he was like, if you're trying to tell someone, what runs would I read to try and get into the vibe for the film? I was like, well, you can't really go fucking reading that because it's going to spoil the film for you.
Yeah. I mean, Sin City, they literally used the storyboards. Sorry, they literally used the graphic novel as the storyboards for the film.
And then same as Watchmen. Which I think done that really, like...
No, Watchmen did change some shit, but for the
to the most part, like,
really, other than the ending, really,
the ending, really, and I guess kind of the vibe. But like, I remember at the time, I maybe hadn't read Watchmen, or I had, or whatever. But like, I remember being really like enamored by the fact that they did essentially use the comic as a storyboard.
Yeah. And
for like someone like Zack Snyder, who, to be honest, like, not to be a hater or whatever, like, but I really liked his Dawn of the Dead remake. I thought the Watchmen was serviceable, but like, it's hard to do. There's a pretty good adaptation, but I like that they used a lot of the points from the story. And then when you see films that like the Fox X-Men films that stray so far away from comics, sometimes you're like, if they don't do something exceptional, you're like, well, then maybe you should have just fucking translated that story that was fantastic and just do it well without having to even change stuff. But then I guess there's an element of, it's all about the how well that is done, because they could copy it straight for straight, like, exactly, and maybe there's nothing as much else to it. It's kind of like the animated Batman,
the
graphic
Halloween
novel
stuff,
that kind of stuff. So like, it's the same with a comic, or same with a game. Yeah, you have to be. They have to do something. They can, I guess, they can do it. They can recreate it, but you have to do it well enough that it's not like leaving you kind of a bit empty at the end, going like, well, you just recreated it. Like, it's not much to it.
For a long time, and I know they won't do this because Telltale already had their Batman games, which were obviously an original story, with Troy Baker playing Batman and stuff, which I enjoyed. Those games, those were fine. But for years, I've wanted a company like Telltale, or IO Interactive maybe, or a company that releases games like interstitially. You know what I mean? Like how Telltale goes up in seasons, or Hitman goes up in, like, missions and stuff.
Yeah.
Do that, right? But do a comic run. Do like Batman from year 1 to Infinite Crisis, or what was the last one called? Final Crisis. Do like that era of Batman. The Killing Joke, and you could do Long Halloween.
Telltale game.
And each chapter is a graphic novel. So like this month,
and maybe you could alter you could fuck around with the story then if you're making your choices. Like, you can go different routes.
I guess.
You can what if it yourself, or
and then because I think the problem with translating it directly, right? See, when you sit and read like a Batman story or something, there is a good majority of it that is just conversational or walking around, and it's like, well, if this was going to be a game, there wouldn't be much gameplay to it. But if you've done it in the Telltale style of being like a narrative game, and then the odd fighting section that happens in those comics, that's your section for gameplay. I don't know. Or you could do it with Punisher Max. I've always said the same for Punisher Max. The way that's told could also be broken up into interstitial chapters and kind of released that way. I think that would be really interesting just to see how they would do direct adaptation. You take the character from that point to that point.
Yeah.
I mean, you could get really creative, and you could start like adopting the art style. You know, a different art style for each, based on the comics. You know, for each chapter. I understand that would be a wee bit far for a game company to recreate Tim Sale and then Alan Brian Boland, and then I don't know. I've always thought that would be a really cool idea, a really cool experience, because as much as I love like the Arkham games, they basically took what the animated series did, Batman animated series, and kind of expanded on it, and it wasn't really spot on accurate to the games. They did their own thing, which, don't get me wrong, the Arkham universe is a super interesting Elseworld story. Alongside the comics, just the same way that the Chris Nolan films are, they do their own thing and they do their own interesting story that isn't necessarily the exact same, other than the cues it takes. And I'm super excited to see Matt Reeves' version next month as well, which again looks different again. So,
but to be honest with you, I think it has an element of looking a lot like the Christopher Nolan stuff. But at the same time, as people were saying, and I mean, we mentioned it here in the previous episode, that it does have a very comic book feel to it too.
Yeah.
But also it has a little bit more of that kind of magic to it.
It does feel slightly more exaggerated than Chris Nolan's grounded version, but at the same time, I think it also takes itself a bit more. Chris Nolan's Bruce Wayne still did the whole Playboy, guy with the good patter at parties thing. I don't really see Robert Pattinson's version doing that, so that kind of adds an element of really, that whole idea that Batman is the real person and Bruce Wayne's the mask. I think that's going to be this version of Batman. I don't think Bruce Wayne's going to be much of a character. I think it's going to be 90% Batman.
Or is there more intertwined?
At least for this first movie, I think that is the case. Like, he's going to be in the movie as Batman far more than he will be as Bruce Wayne, which is kind of interesting.
Well, I always kind of took the Bruce Wayne parts of fucking what's his name? The guy who played Batman.
Christian Bale.
Yeah, I always took his Bruce Wayne parts as just being very superficial, and he was really the one guy in between it all. Like, even he was more of a Batman than he was a Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe just like fucking Patterson isn't going to have any part of that.
But what I think would be interesting with these movies, obviously this is Pattinson in like year 2, so it's the start of his career. So you could portray it in the sense that he's not really developed that character yet. Do you know what I mean? Maybe as the films go on, he starts to realise, oh shit, I'm going to need to go to these social events and kid on that I'm, at fundraisers and whatever, and then he could kind of develop that side of him, that character. Like, at first he's just himself, he doesn't give a shit, and then he realises, I can actually use this to my advantage and kind of play both sides against each other, both alter egos, and I don't know. You can kind of expand on it that way. But that has nothing to do with video games.
Nothing to do with games at all. Here we go.
So we've brought up a list because Uncharted is out, even though we've not seen it. We figured we would go through all of the projects that are in development currently to adapt video games into movies/TV shows. There was also news that just broke the other day that Bioshock has been made into a movie. So I don't know if that's on this list, but if it's not, we'll touch on that.
I see it here, yeah.
But that is the most recent version. So, sorry, Jerd, have you got the list that is starting with...
Sonic?
Right, okay. Yep, I'm on the same page. So, right, okay, let's just start with that. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was confirmed. That was part of the... Paramount Pictures had an Investors Day where they announced the new Star Trek movie, Star Trek 4. But J.J. Abrams announced that. I don't know if he's directing. No, he's not directing that. Sorry, who is directing that? Christ, it's a decent director, and I was quite happy with the choice.
It was kind of late. I remember it was like kind of half awake because I seen the news kind of.
Can't remember who it is, but it's a decent director. It's not Abrams. He's producing. But so that day they also announced Quiet Place 3 and Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I've not seen the first Sonic. I've never been.
Oh, you haven't?
Sonic. No, and I've never been a Sonic guy. Growing up, I was never even a Pokemon or a Mario guy, but I was more into Pokemon and Mario than I ever was Sonic.
Yeah. I wasn't that. We our first console at home was fucking PS1, so like I had played Sonic on friends' Sega Mega Drives and such. So I played bits of it. Like I never really got that obsessed with it. I think there was a cartoon in the 90s that I might have watched. I definitely had a kind of like a good vibe for Sonic, and I wasn't really that arse watching it, but I watched it and I thought it was grand. Yeah,
I mean, it is kind of nuts to watch his trajectory. Like when you go back to that era of the 90s, it was neck and neck between Mario and Sonic. Those were like the big two video game mascots. It was like it was like Call of Duty and Battlefront. Do you know what I mean? Those were the two kind of leaders in their field, and then Nintendo just absolutely wiped the floor with Sega for the next 20 years, and then all of a sudden they make this Sonic movie, and all of a sudden Sonic seems to be popular again. So it is quite interesting, you know, to look at the kind of trajectory. And it was also a weird comeback for Jim Carrey as well, apparently, that movie. But I've not seen the film, so I don't know much about it.
There's it's kind of like, it's basic. It's very kind of aware that it's coming up in like a superhero world at this stage. Like you think or maybe that's in the trailer for the second one, or in the first one he's like being a suit, like he calls himself the Dark something or whatever, like
right.
That's just where he's coming up in. It's not, I wouldn't say it's amazing, but it's fun. I can definitely see it getting better. It's just I think it's one of those films where, or a game adaptations where they kind of just did it serviceably well. It's not. I think it's a lot of people were saying it's kind of maybe more just for like kind of what it's aimed for kids. Like it's not.
Yeah.
You know, they're not going to have. It's fun. It's entertaining. It's what's the word? Very inoffensive. Like there is that one that's in the trailer. The joke with Jim Carrey and the guy goes like, he's giving out to his like underling, and the man is like, do you want a copy? He's like, yes. I love the way you make them. It's just like this really kind of offbeat joke that it's probably the best joke of the whole film, but it's in the trailer. But like, there's nothing in it that was bad. I don't think. I thought it was enjoyable. It'd be interesting to see where it goes. I guess it's kind of a little bit weird because it's so removed from Sonic that it's like it's in the human world. But I guess probably the cartoon did that back in the day. I don't remember.
I think, to me, as an outsider, the most fascinating aspect of that whole project was the change in character design.
Oh, yeah.
From that original trailer. Like, that was a big, big deal. It was the first time that a company really made a decision as major as that based on fan reaction that I can remember. So, I mean, the fact that they did that, it probably cost a fortune, and yet it somehow paid off.
I'd say that's probably the main reason the second film got made. Like, he looked so weird beforehand. Like,
I think that saved this franchise. I really do.
It's stupid that they went so weird. Like, it's like you're making Sonic just fucking.
Yeah, just
you don't need to make him kind of realistic. Like, he's,
no, 100%. And I think that the risk paid off financially. I think the first one made a fair amount of money, more than anyone expected. And as you said, I think it breathed life into the opportunity for a franchise off of the back of it. I think if we'd went with that original design, it would have been one and done. Do you know what I mean? I think it would have been. Yeah,
it's kind of that's kind of like the thing where it's like, you know, it's like when like the X-Men film, the Fox X-Men films is like, why are you going so far away from what's already right there in front of you? Like, you don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. So Sonic
made $306 million US. Guess it's not worldwide. I don't know. Maybe it is. And let's see what the budget was.
Yeah, just not be worldwide. I feel like these movies do very well in China as well, in Asia and countries like that. I think these animated movies, I think they kind of, well, obviously the characters, Sega is a Japanese company. But I think they really like it over in the East.
Yeah, well, that's a huge market. Like any film seems.
Oh
to be
like, movies can be made. Some movies are made or broken due to just the Chinese market. Like, that was the reason we got Venom 2. Was just because
I was just gonna say, Venom got fucking eaten up over there. Like,
it's nuts. And yet, some movies that you think are doing really well here, and you're seeing all this promotion. If they crash over there, then they don't get a sequel. It can really make or break a franchise, which is kind of interesting. Yes, so speaking of Sonic and his sort of band of video game mascots, we are also getting a Mario movie at some point starring Chris Pratt, who is playing everybody under the sun. Apparently he's also playing Garfield. I don't think me or Jerd like Chris Pratt, so I feel like this is going to be a very biased discussion.
He's not even doing, like, there's like I remember just seeing so many. I think we may have talked about this in a previous pod or in a different variation of this pod. Anyone else, Joey Tribbiani or fucking Matt LeBlanc, like fucking anybody else they could have cast. Like cast an actual, like, obviously the character is like ties to being like, you know, it's kind of like a crude Italian stereotype. It's cast an Italian or cast an Italian American, fucking, you know.
Yeah. Why didn't just cast an Italian actor? Because if you go with Chris Pratt, right, you've got two options. You're going to have, I don't think this is going to happen, but you could have Chris Pratt doing a really, as you said, inappropriate, crass, it's a me, you know, voice.
Yeah.
Or you have him playing bland white guy that he played in the Lego Movie. Do you know what I mean? Just doing that same
I just don't get it.
And it's just not interesting. It's like, well, as you said, you could cast any middle-aged white American actor and it would be the same, you know, outcome. So why not go with somebody that genuinely is Italian and just see what they do with it? If they want to play up the accent, fair enough. If they don't and they want to play it a bit more grounded, you know, just it would be far more interesting than just another Chris Pratt vehicle, you know.
I guess he must be a particularly bankable star, but like I would have just thought that his popularity had seriously waned in the last
the whole
2 years.
The whole Christian thing is crazy kind of
the gateway thing.
Goes
like,
to,
and then just messy.
Yeah.
And then he's just, I don't know.
And even honestly, before I knew any of that stuff, I wasn't a fan of the guy. I've always thought he comes across as someone that thinks he's far funnier than he actually is. And that's always annoyed me. For me, he's the worst part of the Guardians films. I feel like everything he does, it's like he thinks that he's being funny, and it's like it's chuckle worthy, but he acts as if he's just done something that's, you know, rolling about the flare funny, and you're like, mate, you're not that funny. Like, I don't know.
He had serious bank of likability coming, like, especially everyone was like, oh my god, he got so ripped, and then like coming from Parks and Rec, he was very enjoyable in Parks and Rec, and was very, I think everyone was kind of like a little bit obsessed. I think like I can't. I think
that's a whole underdog thing though. I think at that stage, because he was just a fat chubby guy from Parks and Rec, and it was like, oh, good for him getting a role in a Marvel movie, like that. He had that kind of goodwill behind him, I think.
Yeah.
And now that he is Mr. Handsome six pack, and he's a bit of a homophobe at his church, and you're like, maybe we shouldn't have put all our stock in this guy. Like,
he kind of comes along with the vibe with the Joe Rogan stuff, and it's just like, I think everyone's like,
and
then Endgame too, actually, like assassinated.
Yeah.
The fucking Star-Lord's character, like, so I think that kind of just came at a certain time.
Yeah.
And I think it was just a couple of things that just like, and especially like, say when one studio cast him as Sonic, or which I can't remember, or Mario, and then the other one cast him as Garfield. I think Garfield was after.
I think so, yeah. Just a couple of weeks after, I think.
When one of them did it, you're like, oh fuck, maybe we made a bad decision here. Like, you see the reactions people are having here. That he just like in that short space of time, I think it was just like a perfect storm of stuff to kind of just his likability was just like gone, I think.
And I think the thing as well, I think Garfield, regardless of who you cast, it's probably going to be a generic animated kids movie. But Mario could have been something if he'd casted somebody more interesting, and I feel like casting Chris Pratt,
I think if he was just cast as Garfield, it probably would have been alright. I don't think there would be as much backlash. If just the Garfield, are like, whatever. There's no real personality attached to Garfield. But then it's like, then they're making a Mario, like, again, it's not a good stereotype, the Italian accent or whatever, but if you're cast, like, then what's, like, you're kind of, like, diluting, like, what is it about, what makes him Mario then? Like, even though, look, obviously, again, even the actor who does the fucking Mario voice is in Italian, like, but...
No, but...
You know, that could have been a good
He was also
like,
cast 20, 30 years ago. before cultural appropriation was on anybody's mind. That
like, you know, like...
Do you know what I mean? Things have changed a lot since that guy was cast as Mario. Like, I think that's also important to remember as well.
It's just like, well, what's the point? Like, like, they could have been a really good, like, recast, like, casting of an Italian actor.
Cast an unknown, cast something you don't know, because also it's not going to be distracting when Mario sounds like Star-Lord. Do you know what I mean? Like, if Mario sounds like someone you don't know, then you just see that character. But if he walks on screen and sounds like Star-Lord, you're immediately going to be like, oh, that's Chris Pratt. Do you know what I mean?
But even there'd be like Italian actors who we'd never even fucking hear of, who, like, you know, could be like the top of their game in Italy. But you know, obviously you have to get someone who speaks English too. But like, not to say that doesn't exist. There's an Italian actor who hasn't had some experience, but maybe gets some worldwide known. And,
like another movie on this list that I think we'll go to next is Detective Pikachu sequel. When they cast Ryan Reynolds, they used that and played on the fact that Pikachu sounds like Ryan Reynolds, Pikachu sounds like Deadpool. That was kind of the joke in the trailers, and they kind of used that to their advantage.
Yeah.
As opposed to not saying anything about it, not addressing it, and you're watching it going, it's just Ryan Reynolds.
It's a part of it, yeah.
You know, if you kind of play it up, I think that's how you get away with casting, you know, a bankable star as a known character. You have to kind of, with your marketing and stuff, I think you kind of need to make the joke of that and marry the two.
I think it's funny, like, to think of the two of them side by side, because I think Ryan Reynolds has kind of reached a point of like, okay, here, he's up with the Ryan Reynolds, like, yeah, he's funny in Deadpool, but he's in everything now, but he doesn't have any kind of like awkward homophobic, you know, church relations, and then like, I don't know, maybe political like leanings on top of that.
Yeah, he seems like a genuinely decent guy.
Yeah, he's funny too, like, and he is charming, but like, I think he has the same touch of the things, but like Chris Pratt has a couple of like, has a few extra strings to his bow of dislikability, I guess. Just
comparing the two, regardless of like political stuff or anything, I just think Ryan Reynolds is a bit more self-deprecating than Chris Pratt, and I think that makes him a bit more funny. I think his affability helps. I think Chris Pratt is a bit more arrogant, whereas, don't go wrong, I'm sure that Ryan Reynolds knows that he's a handsome, talented, funny millionaire, but it doesn't feel like he's waving it in your face. It feels like he's playing, you know, he kind of put himself down in certain movies.
Yeah.
He has a sort of affability that makes you okay with it, whereas Chris Pratt seems a bit more up himself, in my opinion.
Yeah, and then, but also, like, you put that, like, we got a new trailer for it there, you put Chris Pratt is also bang in the middle of the new Jurassic Park series. Like, they had to put someone in it, but
sure.
That felt like, I didn't watch any of the new Jurassic Parks, even though I think Jurassic Park was my first obsession as a kid.
Right. I was never big into Jurassic Park, but I really do not like those Jurassic World films.
I haven't got near them yet, but like, it definitely feels like you've got an old property and it's just bang, this is the new popular star, let's throw him in there. So like, he's in a couple of things like that now where it's even like choices. I think if I was him, I'd even be like, just, you don't fucking have to be in everything, like, just chill out, like, or you don't have to be like, when he's also always the lead and stuff, it kind of takes, I guess we're kind of gone past that movie star role, like, where it's, you know,
and as you're saying, I think it kind of speaks to his own agency as a person. Like, he shouldn't be taking these roles one after the other. Like, I know that it's money, it's probably a shit ton of money, but as an actor and as a creative, you should be trying to break away from that. Do you know what I mean? He's done, think about it, he's done a Lego movie, he's done the Jurassic movies, he's done a Marvel movie, like, those are all big franchises.
All blockbusters, yeah.
And now he's signed up to Garfield and Mario. It's like, go and make an indie film, go and make a film with a small director for
produce some shit. I'm
£1
sure,
like,
maybe he does, I don't know.
But just I feel like that would give him way more. I think you can justify doing these blockbusters if you can then go and do, you know, ridiculous side projects like Daniel Radcliffe does. Do you know what I mean? Daniel Radcliffe often does that and kind of bounces between the two.
He's the for that now. The Weird Al Yankovic coming up soon.
Yeah. I saw photos of him dressed as Weird Al the other day. They look great.
Apparently the big, like, Weird Al Yankovic is apparently really fucking tall, and like Daniel Radcliffe's tiny.
Yeah, he's really short. Yeah,
just funny.
But yeah, I think that would help him.
Even anything, like, 'cause any role he's doing is like, he's like it's just the lead. Like, there's no. I guess it's like, I don't know. You don't want to just eat steak every day. Like,
it's like even Channing Tatum, who's another handsome white guy about the same age, who kind of previously people didn't like him, and he did 21 Jump Street, and people were like, "Well, this guy's funny." Channing Tatum's got a movie coming out that he directed and I think wrote, and it's about him. He's an ex-marine and he's to get a dog from like one state to another state.
Is that the same one with Sandra Bullock, or is that a different thing?
No, that's another one. I
heard of that and I see the trailers.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. He's making this kind of like more rom-com generic blockbustery type film with Sandra Bullock, and then he's doing this kind of character study, smaller comedy film with the dog on the side. So I think having both is kind of, you know, it's a bit of contrast. I don't get me wrong, he's Channing Tatum, he doesn't have that much range, but at least he's trying to do different things, you know, at least he's trying to do different projects.
Do you know, the first time I seen him, or took notice of him, what was his breakout role?
Step Up. He was in the Step Up movies.
I seen him in A Guide to Recognizing Your Saints, and that was another string to Robert Downey's bow of, like, I keep saying that fucking phrase. But I got both. But that was another like core step. Well, in my eyes anyway, of Robert Downey kind of his comeback. It was based on a book that I think Robert Downey was friends with the guy, or he read the book and became friends with him. And it was like, not that I've ever seen Kids, but it was very of that vibe. And I believe Rosario Dawson is in Kids. And Rosario Dawson and Robert Downey Jr. actually played the older versions of these two characters. And Shia LaBeouf is actually, so it's set back in the 80s in New York. And me and my mates watched it one summer. We just watched it every fucking day because it was back before Netflix or we didn't have a rake of DVDs. We just loved this film. Great soundtrack. But Channing Tatum was like this kind of ne'er-do-well friend of Shia LaBeouf's character. And it was a very, like, he was just a very hard-ass character. He was like a real kind of bruiser, but he was like, he'd look out for Shia LaBeouf's character, but he was a real damaged kid. And he was just fucking brilliant in it. Like, that was very early in his career.
What's that film called, Jerd?
A Guide to Recognizing Your Saints.
I've never even heard of it. But
maybe it's even, like, in New York. I don't think so. But it has, like, it has that Ace Feely from Kiss, the New York Groove song.
Right.
Back in the great soundtrack, and just it's a kind of harrowing story. There's a guy in it who does a kind of, for both of us, I think in real life the guy was Irish, but in the film he's Scottish, and he gets confused for being Irish in the film.
Right. Okay.
So I think he's a Scottish actor. I think he's been in something pretty big, like maybe a kind of another harrowing story. And Chaz Pazzametti, the guy who was in all the like gangster films in the 90s.
Okay.
He's a great, it's an amazing cast, an amazing film. It's tough watch, but that's very good.
Yeah. Yes, let's go on to Detective Pikachu sequel. Did you see that first movie?
I did not. I heard it's good. I heard it's like
it was fine.
Like a 4 out of 5, maybe something like that.
It was very. This happens quite often especially with sort of kids movies and family movies. I find so many of them come out and. On social media and on review sites and stuff, it's like, oh, this was much better than I expected it to be. This is a great movie. This is this, that, and that. It happened with Bumblebee as well, the Transformers movie. And then, so see when those movies come out, I've not got any interest in sitting and watching them, by myself. So I'll kind of save them up for when we are babysitting. And Courtney's two nieces come up, and I'm like, right, I want to see these films, and we've got Wayne's here, so let's put on Detective Pikachu or Bumblebee or whatever. So one night we put this on, and it happened with Spider-Verse as well. I really found that overrated, personally.
What?
Again,
oh my god.
It's an okay kids film, but that's really all it is to me.
Fucking hell.
But again, now Detective Pikachu got a similar kind of response. It's like, oh, this is great, and it's got so many layers to it, and blah, blah, and I'm like, yeah, okay.
Didn't win a fucking Oscar though.
Oscars don't mean shit. But Suicide Squad won an Oscar for the first one.
For hair and makeup, which is like, I never get that, and the makeup in that film.
Whatever. It wasn't a big Oscar, but yeah, still. Anyway, Detective Pikachu, it was fine. It was a fairly entertaining kids film. It's
kind of played with the property a bit from what I could see from the trailers. But
I did I think the first kind of 3/4 of it were okay. The main character annoyed me slightly. I can't remember the character's name. Yeah, the kid was a bit annoying. But he's fine.
He's only like 17.
It's okay. In fact, wait. That same kid is in Bumblebee. Maybe it was in Bumblebee that annoyed me. That kid annoyed me in something. I think it might have been Bumblebee. Maybe he was actually tolerable in Detective Pikachu. Can't remember. But yeah, I'm sure he was like the annoying friend in Bumblebee. But anyway, it was fine. It was fine. And they made the sequel because the first one made money. And
serviceable, yeah.
Bill Nye was a bad guy. So.
Sure. Oh really?
I like Bill Nye. Yeah, he was. Is it Mewtwo?
Really?
Yeah, it was Bill Nye. Yeah.
Did he have his like just proper Bill Nye voice?
Oh yeah, proper Bill Nye voice. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I didn't even want to watch it just for that.
Yeah, that was probably the best part of the film because I was really losing interest, and then he came into it at the very end, and I was like, oh, that's cool. They're making a Minecraft movie.
Where are we?
What are they going to do? Sorry, with the third one down on that list.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
Okay, like I know it's a huge franchise. Kids love it, and adults. I mean, Minecraft's a multi-billion-dollar franchise. I've never been into it, but people love Minecraft.
My nephew's obsessed. My young
nephew. I just wonder how do you put that in a story? Like how do you, the whole point in
Minecraft blank slate,
is
like.
Well, I guess it's similar to the Lego movie in a way, because the idea with Lego is you get given these blocks and then you make your own story.
Yeah,
and I guess Minecraft is the digital version of that.
Yeah, I can see like you could do a lot with it.
They've done a fairly good job with the Lego movie, kind of transforming that into a story and then relating it to like the real world. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think it is a pretty blank slate, like something like that, because like it's kind of like, well, I don't know. I think Fortnite has some kind of story elements to it, but I imagine if they did something like Fortnite, now it's not on the list. We're not talking about previous ones, but like Wreck-It Ralph, that kind of had like where you, and I guess what Space Jam should have been, where you have, you're kind of just going in and you're like having the crack with the property and the characters, and you can have, you can have, like, say, a villain guy being like really childish or something, or you can have the hero being like, you can kind of make fun of the characters but have fun with them at the same time. So, but especially Minecraft, there's no real characters in that, is it? It's just like don't speak.
No.
Something.
Yeah, because you create your own character and then you dress yourself. Yeah. But yeah, I agree with you though. I think Minecraft would do well to kind of expand beyond just the Minecraft game in the way that Wreck-It Ralph does. Interact with people outside of that and things. Might be the best way to tackle it. But yeah, I don't have any stock. I don't care really. If it's good or shit. It's fine either way. Tomb Raider, sequel to Tomb Raider. We got a movie 2018 with Alicia Vikander. Amazingly, I've not seen Uncharted yet. Amazingly, I would say that Tomb Raider's probably the best video game movie ever made, and it's like a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of quite. I heard it was quite passable.
That shows you how low the bar is. It's a very, just as a movie, it's very generic action adventure, but it wasn't a bad video game movie, so that got it some merit in my eyes. I was like, oh well, fair dues. They're making a sequel. They did. Again, they seem to like to do this with video game adaptions. Obviously, they've done it with Uncharted, how the second movie is going to be the first game and whatever. The very end of the first Tomb Raider movie is when she gets her two guns, her two Desert Eagles.
So the whole movie, the way those new, they kind of rebooted the series worked too, was it?
Yes, well,
I played the first one and I got about halfway through the second one. And I was like,
the first movie is very much that first reboot, which was, I love those reboot games. I really enjoyed the first two were great.
Speaking of physics and stuff, like the first game, and I always I remember I might have been Uncharted 1 or Uncharted 2 back in the day. Like I used to love playing the online because I love third person, and like I fucking Tomb Raider was my jam when I was growing up. I fucking loved it. Like I used to love playing it so much, but. It was very it really tied into my childhood because I remember just getting the games around Christmas time and stuff. And, I definitely had first game I didn't play as much, but the second game, like when you got the cheats and shit, and then the third game, those two games were massive for me. But the new reboot had like a multiplayer that I just love the physics of it, and it's kind of why I really like Days Gone now. I just love the how the guns handle and stuff, and it's one of those kind of games where. There's still people playing it multiplayer online, but it's not like a big multiplayer game.
Right. I never touched the multiplayer, but I really enjoyed those games. The first movie, like I said, it wasn't a great movie, but it was good. It was good. It wasn't okay. I would go as far as say it was good. It wasn't great. It was good.
I'd say it's a bit the action is a bit kind of like I imagine what Uncharted is. It's like. It's action that it's not really like they're essentially superheroes. Like they're not. Like say, I know there's elements of stupidness or whatever, but like Die Hard 1 to Die Hard 6. Die Hard 6, he's essentially a superhero and he can do whatever. But yeah, I'd imagine it's a little bit like that where it's kind of heightened reality.
I mean, my worry I think is the first one kind of was based on those reboot games, and then the way it ended was almost as if it was setting up Lara Croft, the character, to become what she was in those original games. I hope that when they're blending the two, they don't. I think it would be a bit of a creative U-turn if all of a sudden there was a T-Rex chasing her, for example, like happens in those old games. I think you need to build up to that. Do you know what I mean? I think we need to get there.
One thing I found about the new games, I thought the story was muck and the acting was terrible. Maybe it's just the English accent of the Tomb Raider lady in it. I just thought it was very. And I felt like it had that kind of Far Cry element of just like, oh, this sounds so dumb. Like, stop saying stupid shit.
I think there was a Scottish guy as well that had a really poor accent from what I can remember in that first game.
Oh yeah, like it was the old sailor or something.
Yeah, I remember.
Oh, was it not a good Scottish accent? Was it not a Scottish?
Oh no, it was horrible. It was very. Have you seen The King's Man yet?
No.
Well, there's a character in that who. There's a kind of spoiler of who he is, so I won't say it, but it's shite anyway. But there's a character in that does a Scottish accent, and it's very, forced. And this is kind of similar to that.
I know.
But yeah, Tomb Raider, sure, they're making a sequel. I'll probably see it. I don't think it's going to be incredible, but it's probably going to be what the Uncharted movie was. It's probably going to be middle of the road, decent, It's not going to go down in history like Indiana Jones, Temple with Kid with the Crystal Skull in it, and it's not going to be that bad, and it's not going to be, Raiders of the Lost Ark good either. It's going to be something in between. Do you know what I mean? It's not going to be. I don't know. That's just my prediction.
That's what they kind of got to be aiming for. Any of the like Uncharted or Tomb Raider, it's like you basically just have to treat this as a reboot of Indiana and do it well. Yeah. It's. I'd even like fucking really forget about anything else and just try and make a good Indiana reboot, because that's what those games are playing on anyway.
Well, it's super interesting how obviously Indiana Jones was the first, and then you had Tomb Raider, which took elements of Indiana Jones, and then you had Uncharted, which took elements of both, and then Tomb Raider reboot took elements from Uncharted. So it's interesting how they all kind of borrow from each other as time goes by. But yeah. Right, the next movie on the list again is an interesting one. They're apparently doing a Borderlands movie. There is quite a significant cast announced. I think Cate Blanchett's in it.
It's been in development for a long time, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been in development for a while. Again, this is a game where it's been a while since I played Borderlands, but you create your own character, you go out in this world, and you kind of make choices, and it's quite a branching open world game. So how you're going to kind of make that linear and make it, a narrative story, I'm not sure. There's interesting characters, there's interesting locations and things like that in that game, and there is like lore to it, but it's more a game where like you go and read documents that tell you the lore of what happened 20 years ago. Do you know what I mean? It's not really happening in the moment. A lot of the stuff that happens in the moment is just getting you from point A to point B checkpoints. Do you know what I mean? It's not really an in-depth story game, so I'm quite interested to see.
More of a multiplayer kind of thing, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it is a
multiplayer.
It was originally, it was intended to be co-op. That was the kind of
that's it, yeah. Friends of mine played, but I think I might have started I might have opened it up on some.
It came
at some point.
The first one came out not long after Left 4 Dead, so that was that era where they were trying to push online co-op. So it was very much in that vein. I mean, you could play single player. I think I've played the first 3. I don't think I've played the new one. I don't even know if I own Borderlands 4's not out yet. I don't know. I don't really. You can tell I don't know much about this franchise. I've played the games. They're fine. I played the single player. But yeah, I don't know how.
It's kind of like a Mad Max post-apocalyptic, but kind of neon, and there's robots and aliens. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, and it's very cell shaded. Everything's it's more like mutants. But yeah, it's all very like cell shaded and like
Fallouty.
Well, yeah,
arcadey at the same time.
Yeah, it's more colourful than Fallout. It's not as drab. There's less browns and olives and more colour play.
Is it a live action film?
Yes, as far as I know. I think it will have animated elements like Claptrap and stuff, like the robot, but I think the majority of it is going to be live action.
Kind of. Well, I guess I don't know. I assume there is some characters you interact with, but if they could kind of build it backwards, it'd be just very stylistic, post-apocalyptic. Use the elements of the lore, and kind of maybe they can or cannot use some characters, maybe create some of their own.
I think some of the concern with games like this, they get adapted, is the Mortal Kombat issue. With that reboot that just came out, by far the least interesting element of that new movie was the original character that they created. The main
the
guy,
magic jumper.
That was clearly the least interesting part of that film, and that's because they created it in 10 minutes for the sake of this movie. Whereas, you're going up against characters that have been around for 20 odd years, it's not going to stack up. And it's kind of the same with Borderlands. It's like you've already got, this. If you're a fan of Borderlands, you're also going to be a fan of, the villains and the different side characters and stuff. If you've got all these established characters, and all of a sudden there's Mr. Joe Average comes in and he's like, "Oh, I'm the main guy and it's all about me." But see, this character you really like, he gets 2 minutes of screen time, and I think that's when it starts to become. That's when you start to alienate the fans of the thing, and it kind of loses, the spirit of the original. But I think as long as they don't do that, then it can't go too bad.
While we're close to briefly, I thought that Mortal Kombat could have been really good. There was some nice elements to it, but I thought it was very cheaply made and very rushed.
My issue with Mortal Kombat, I had many issues with it, but my main issue. So there's a scene where Kung Lao puts his hat down and spins it, and in the game obviously you pull the guy through it and it splits him in two. There's a scene now in the movie Mortal Kombat when he starts pulling the guy through it, the camera cuts away and I think you just see the blood splatter. There was another movie that came out, Freaky, and it was like Freaky Friday. Vince Vaughn was a serial killer.
Yes, it's a young girl.
A young girl stabs him. Or no, he stabs a young girl at midnight on a certain night with a secret dagger or something, and then they swap bodies. And then Vince, this will be last in Vince Vaughn's body, and that's the comedy. But there's a scene in that movie where the wee girl, there's a kind of creepy teacher who's just annoying her and harassing her the whole movie. And at one point, he's a woodworking teacher, and at one point she shoves him out the woodworking table with one of the table saws and pushes him through it. And that is way more satisfying than that Kung Lao scene from. And when I was watching it, I'm like, why did that have a better fatality scene than the Mortal Kombat movie?
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? Like, that really pissed me off.
Well, I think the only thing that I actually kind of enjoy, because I had heard some reviewers saying, "Oh, they're making Scorpion the most important character," but I love Scorpion, and I think he had a tiny part in the original, the '90s films, which I guess some people would say their first one of those was kind of all right.
People like that movie. I never saw it at the time. I saw it years later, so I just thought it was dated shit. Yeah, but people do like it. I think it was something you had to see at the time. I think.
Yeah, I think that happens. But the elements that I thought were good and they were kind of apparent in the trailer was just the Scorpion and Sub-Zero fights. They seem to be done quite well. They seem to be coming out of a different. If you just went back and just focused on their shit, that'd be way more interesting.
Basically, what you're saying is, if you want an entertaining Mortal Kombat movie, just YouTube those fights between Scorpion and Sub-Zero, and then ignore the rest. Just watch the highlights, basically.
Wasn't there did they kind of try and do a realistic take on it a couple of years ago as a web series? I remember friends of mine. I'm
not sure. I'd never seen it. If they did,
I think it was bits were all right, but they kind of tried to who was it? Your man is it Blanca? The guy, I don't know, the guy with the fucking sword, katanas coming out of his hands.
But
Baracus, yeah. I think he was he was a human, but he was a mutant, but not in such a fantastical way. And he grafted these they tried to make it a bit more realistic or something.
Right. That is ringing a bell, but I never saw it.
Yeah, nor did I. I remember just. As you may have guessed, I have other nerdy mates, but one of my mates he'd watch anything based on anything, and he'd be like, "Oh, that's good," but I don't know. Actually, putting it out in the light today, would it be enjoyable?
Moving on to the next film, this is going from a movie like Borderlands that doesn't really have much of a story to it. BioShock is such a narrative game that I think it is ripe for an adaptation. Personally, I think I would rather see it as a TV series. If I had three wishes, right? If I had anything I wanted, I would have it as a mini series on HBO or Netflix or something, and I would have Guillermo del Toro come on as the creative force behind it. I think del Toro's take on the BioShock world would be really something.
Yeah.
When you think of Hellboy and Shape of Water and stuff, just that and Rapture would just be so damn cool.
Rapture's the first one, isn't it?
Rapture's the first one and the second one.
That's when you're playing as the Big Daddy.
Yeah, the second one's a weird outlier. So the guy that kind of came up with the games, created the games, called Ken Levine. He only worked on the first and the third. He didn't work on the second one. The second one was made pretty much by the company as a money grab. They were trying to continue the franchise, and I don't hate BioShock 2. I quite enjoy. I didn't play the first one at the time because when they first came out, they were actually Xbox exclusives way back in the day.
Really?
They didn't come. Yeah. They didn't come to play. They did come to PlayStation 3, but they came out in 360, and then I think it was 4 years later they brought out a special remastered edition for PS3. So that was when it was actually a double pack, and it was that I bought, and it was a hard copy, and it had BioShock 1 and 2 in it, and I played them back to back. And although it's if you play them like that back to back, the story elements are very front heavy. You know, the part 1 has got all the world building and lore and cutscenes and introductions and monologues, and the second one is more just how cool would it be to be a Big Daddy, or it's more like, you know, an additional piece of DLC. I don't hate it. I enjoyed it, but it's, I guess if you were playing them at the time, if you're a massive fan of that first game and you waited a couple of years and then the second one came out, I can see why you would be disappointed in it. But if you're playing them now, you know, you can buy the 3-pack now, the collection.
I got it for my PC in the last year, so yeah.
Yeah, and if you play them back to back, I enjoy all 3 games. It really does feel, when you think back, it feels more like 2 games because there's only 2 environments. But I enjoy part 2 for what it is. And yeah, part 3 is The City in the Clouds. What's the name of it? With Comstock. Bioshock Infinite. I can't remember.
Well, it seems to be like, or maybe it's just in the first one, isn't the main bad guy? Oh, it's spoiler. Never mind. Bioshock game was very special for me because I might have mentioned before, like, so I had every PlayStation going at a PlayStation 3, and then I just kind of got to a point where I was like, I'm not really fucking playing this at all, so I sold it because I was short for rent 1 month.
Right.
And then maybe like a year or 2 later, I bought an Xbox. Same reason again. I sold it because I wasn't playing it, and I was late on rent. But I kind of got to a point where I was playing the first Arkham game, and I kind of just felt games had moved away from what I was used to. Like, I got to the Killer Croc fight in the first Batman game, and you didn't actually fight him. And like, I always had a thing of, and I think some of the, because I played bits of this, maybe the second one, where like I always kind of felt that a boss shouldn't be a mini game. A boss should always be, if he's a big guy like that, he's just a big guy that you have to punch, and it takes you longer to do it. Like, it's just, you have to fucking grit your teeth and just do as many dodges or whatever, and you'd have to just beat him. So I kind of got a bit sick of that. But then I played Bioshock, and it was the first game, I think, in a couple of years that really captured me. And I fucking loved it. It took me, it's funny because when I had the Xbox 360, I was probably about a year playing it, and it had probably been out a while, and I was just, it was so slow, but I wasn't playing it a crazy amount, but I played it over the course of a year, and I fucking devoured it. I thought it was fantastic.
I'm a Bioshock fan. I did, at the time, think it was a wee bit something like Fallout in some of its stylings, just the Victorian styling and some of the retro
kind of steampunky.
Yeah, steampunky feel. But that world is so interesting. Rapture is such an exciting environment that, yes, you could set a whole series there, or in this case, a movie. So yeah, the only thing they kind of need to get round, obviously, you played a silent protagonist in that first game. Your character didn't have a voice. So that's something they're going to have to...
in the first one, yeah.
Yeah, in the first Bioshock. So that's something they're going to have to do. By the time they got to Columbia. By the time they got to Columbia and Bioshock Infinite, you had Troy Baker as Booker DeWitt. So he was a voice character. So it's not as if it's a franchise that's never had a voice character. You know, you've got that in its history. So I think they'll be able to, put that in somehow and hopefully make something decent.
I can really see that as a very interesting, like, kind of like mini-series, like not to be like kind of reductive, but like, in the same level of kind of fantasy as Game of Thrones, like it's an alternate reality. I can just see it being very, like, the vibe of it being eaten up too, like, because I guess in the third one they kind of bring in racism. There's just fucking mad looking shit, like that bird in the third one.
And then when you get to all the multi-dimensional stuff, it takes on a whole new kind of element to it.
Oh yes, and then there's a lot of shit.
Like
that's a whole.
Yeah, you beat that game
in the same reality. The 2 games.
It starts in the same reality, I think. Yes.
Oh yeah, I get you. What is it?
Because you end up back in Rapture at the end of the third game, I think, and the bird ends up. I can't remember. It's been years since I've played them, but I remember finishing that third game and then having to spend about 3 days reading, anything explained articles and videos to actually get my head around it. But
that's why I do most things, just so I can watch those type of videos on YouTube.
Yeah. Out of all the projects we've talked about so far, I think I'm most excited for this. I think Bioshock has the best chance so far of being something.
I'd say about half this list is easily, we could just fill in whatever. From the ones I know, half of it is just like, it's kind of a blank slate. You can do whatever you want with it. It could be bad or...
I mean, we can go through it then. What one we're most looking forward to, what one we're least looking forward to. Next up is Yakuza. Did you ever play the Yakuza games?
No. My nephew's like what 10 years younger than me. He's far more like he tells me about games and shit all the time, and I'm pretty sure Yakuza is one of the ones he's obsessed with.
I've never been mad on that series. It is very much GTA inspired, except you play in Japan and it's way more. Yeah, it's way more. Don't get me wrong, GTA is satirical and cartoony, but
the physics of it are a little bit more.
It's more Japanese. It's more like a kung fu film. It's more like
the fighting is actually a big part of it too, though, isn't it? It's like it's parry and that kind of crack.
Well, that is. I was somewhat let down when I first played Yakuza. Actually, I remember because again, it's not something I played when it came out. I played it a couple of years later, and I was very much looking for another. At the time, I was looking for another kind of GTA type open world game where I could steal cars and shoot people and do missions. And when I played it and I realised it was very brawler, like it was just you fighting two guys in a pub, I was like, I can't just shoot them or use a chainsaw on them, or I think you do, but they're very sparingly used. It's like for a certain mission you might get a shot of a pistol for a section of it, but the main sort of form of combat is like hand to hand combo Tekken style fighting, and that just wasn't what I was looking for at the time. So that kind of tainted the Yakuza series for me right from the off. And then a couple of years later they brought out a zombie game. I can't remember what it was called, Yakuza something Death Zero, and it was Yakuza with zombies, and I actually really enjoyed that one. It was one of those games that did get too unnecessarily difficult, and the way that a lot of Japanese games tend to, they become very complicated. You only get a certain amount of time to do a certain puzzle, and the puzzle isn't really very clearly explained, and it lost me at a certain point. But yeah, I don't know, they could make it in a movie. I think they should cast the guy from The Raid. He is Indonesian, he's not Japanese. However, I think if you cast him as an Indonesian character in Japan, I think that would be awesome. Eco, I can't remember his surname, Eco something.
I've never seen the Raid films.
Oh, the Raid films are incredible. Really recommend it.
Me and a buddy watched like Judge Dredd, and like, because with that kind of, there was that vibe that Dredd was kind of but in fact it came out at the same time as the Raid.
Yeah, they both came out at the same time. Yeah.
So we watched Dredd, and it's funny because my mate isn't into comic books, but like it kind of inspired him to actually go reading up Wikipedia about Judge Dredd. But we watched Dredd, went to watch the Raid, and we were 5 minutes into it, and we're like, fuck this, let's watch Dredd again. So it became our thing for a while.
I enjoy both those movies in their own right, but yes, they did come out unfortunately close to each other.
Yeah. Do you know, it's funny that you said about when you were saying about the guns and Yakuza. I've never thought to fucking Google this, but this game I loved it at the time, and I'm pretty sure this is PS1. Does this ring any bells for you?
Fighting Force, hell yes.
Oh my god,
what a game!
I fucking loved that game, and
I loved that game.
I literally never thought to Google it in my life before, and I've always just every once in a while I'm like, what was the name of that game? It was like fighting Freedom Fighters,
Force.
And that's the same kind of thing. Yeah. You just pick up a gun. That was really like a proto GTA. It was kind of, I guess it was like, it was coming on from like, it was like third person Streets of Rage.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then like it was kind of, I fucking love that game because you could just pick up a weapon, like you will get a gun, but you don't even have to use it for like fucking. You get like a couple of shots of it to be gone.
Yeah. And you had a choice of 4 characters. You had the big guy, the wee guy, and then it was the 2 women. I think
the guy looks a bit like Gambit.
Well, they made, believe it or not, they made a sequel. Did you ever play Fight Force 2? Well, I've never played the third one, right? But the second one was a totally different game. It was a single player game that mostly took place like indoors. Like that first game, obviously, you were running from building to building and you were out in the streets and stuff. Yeah. The second game very much took place in like an office building, and you had to like solve a mystery. I can't remember what the story was. But yeah, I remember running about. It was the shorter guy that you played as, and I remember running around this office building, and the vending machines were the health. So if you were low in health, you had to find a vending machine and have a can of juice, and you could also throw the cans at people.
PS5.
But I had
50 games like Fighting Force for PlayStation 5. Sorry.
The sequel had way more, I think, gunplay as well. I think you could actually carry a gun, and you had like an inventory that you could store your gun and stuff. I think you might even get a shotgun at one point. It was way more. It was closer to Resident Evil, and its sort of gameplay and environment. You weren't fighting zombies; you were just fighting security guards or whatever. But it was more along those lines than it was a brawler like the first one was.
Yeah.
The first one was great. I think the first one was the better out of the two, but fascinating how different that second game was to the first one. Like nowadays, you would never get that with a sequel. The sequel usually is just the same basic gameplay with an updated story.
Yeah.
But back then, games would just be like, yeah, let's just try something a totally different genre for the sequel. Like, why not?
That game was very special to me because I think it was kind of one of those first games where you could kind of maybe move around and stuff like that, and it was just fucking fun. You're just picking up shit and like.
And I had couch co-op because I remember playing it with my dad, and we had a controller each. I did have couch co-op, which also made it fun, and it wasn't split screen. I remember you were both like it was a kind of fixed camera, so you were both on screen at the same time. I didn't have any split screen bullshit, which was for me the best kind of couch co-op games.
That's something like I guess that's kind of taken us away. Okay, we're gonna start writing a fucking Fighting Force script. That's the kind of thing that you could just do like fucking Fast and Furious.
Yeah, and 100%.
Well, the Yakuza, but like what was the Yakuza Tokyo Drift? Oh, sorry,
Fast and Furious
Tokyo Drift. So like, you could kind of just like it's like a gang thing.
Yeah,
like that's kind of fairly open to.
I mean, the Yakuza, the actual Japanese gang, have been in lots and lots of movies and lots of TV
films,
shows.
Yeah.
So there's plenty to pull from there. If you just kind of picture any story with the Yakuza in it.
Yeah, you've got elements there. I guess you're going to make it a little bit more. If it's going to be coming from a computer game, I guess they kind of maybe the expectation, but like it doesn't have to be. But the expectation would be kind of. Well, like, you're making, like, a mainstream version of, like... Because other than that, I'm sure there is a film called Yakuza, like, already. Like, and, like, it's... But you're making it then, like, an action thing. So you're either making, like, a really kind of, like... I don't know, what's the word? Arcadey version of a crime film. So, do you want to do that? Do you want to try and actually make it a crime film? Does it need to be tied? Do you need to pay for the rights for that? Like, because it's... There's certain games like that where you're like, I guess we'll come to it when we go to the war games, but like, just fucking, why does it need to be like? Because it's kind of like the way, like I've definitely mentioned this before on the pod, where people go on about like, and I think maybe it's yourself, Winter Soldier is like your favorite Marvel film. In my head,
it's up there. It's up there.
That's an espionage film, but it's like, it's not really. It's like a superhero espionage film, so it's kind of in my mind, it's like a sterilized. Not really as good as a superhero, like an actual espionage film, and it's it's the superhero genre of it. So the corners are kind of smoothed out, and it's a bit more bland in compared to what like. So if you did the same thing with like a Yakuza film based from the games, I guess they could go like the games have like that real kind of heightened reality, so you could go that way.
Well, I was actually going to say if I had my pick, and I'm not a Yakuza fan, so maybe you shouldn't listen to me, but. If I had my pick for this project, I'd like to see it done darker. I'd like to see... Because I think that's kind of what I was looking for when I first played it, and I was surprised at how light it was and how kind of colourful, and you had karaoke sections and stuff, and how kind of poppy it was.
A bit more like Saints Row kind of thing, is it?
Yeah, I guess. It's maybe not as satirical as Saints Row, but yeah. It's also not as satirical as GTA. I think it's more just... That is Japanese culture is very like that. If you watch, there's some Japanese movies that have got some really graphic fight scenes and also some karaoke scenes in the same film.
Yeah, Asian stuff is like I'm watching like I again not to be reductive, but like I've been watching a lot of like South Korean stuff recently, and it's like I guess they just approach stories so differently to us. And like again, not to be reductive to contrast two separate countries like South Korea and fucking Japan's filmmaking or whatever, but. It seems to be a little bit more natural over that side of the world to have like the really dark with the kind of real camp humor stuff.
Yeah, Eastern filmmaking and just any sort of media, they have less of an issue with crossing genres than I think we do in the West. I think we have more of a, oh no, you can't have that in this kind of movie. I think there's way more, which I think's maybe a good thing, to be more free-flowing and just be like, hey, let's have a decapitation and then have somebody singing karaoke, like, why not?
Yeah, like we do mix stuff, like I'm even thinking like, in my mind, the greatest Western thing ever made, The Sopranos. They have humor, but it's within that world, and it is like it can be very funny, but it's within the bounds of that world. They can, I guess they can swap genres scene to scene, maybe. and it's more maybe theatrical. I don't know. It's not even really technically a theatrical thing because like Western theater is kind of like doesn't really, it's always. Yeah, maybe that's it. That they literally change genres between scenes, which we wouldn't.
Which sometimes we find jarring, but when you watch, I feel like when you watch a bunch of kung fu films, whether or any sort of film from another culture, the first one you're like, oh, this is different. The second one you're like, and then I feel like by the third or fourth, like sometimes if I go on like a South Korean film binge, you watch Old Boy and you watch Parasite and you watch a bunch of these films. By the third or fourth film, you're just like, this is how it is. This is all the kind of weirdness goes away and you appreciate the film for what it is. So I think it's just that initial. We're so used to a certain structure of storytelling and a certain tone and a certain, especially in terms of cinematic experiences. I think on streaming you can be a bit more risky, but when it comes to bankable movies, blockbusters, there's a vibe that that you're going to get from certain franchises, whereas Eastern movies seem to have less of that contrivance that we seem to have.
Yeah, I find it hard to not like, and I know people were saying that when fucking Parasite came out, saying like, oh, Squid Game's like Parasite, and everyone's like, well, it's not just because it's fucking, but like to our eyes and taste, it is, because it's like Korean films particularly are about. Well, I watched The Wailing last night from 2016. I was kind of on my phone for half of it, but I still got the gist of it. But like, but Squid Game and Parasite do share but that's like. That's what I'd heard about Korean cinema. It was like that they do generally talk about class. There's kind of horrific elements, and there's comedy mixed in. And then like I also watched All of Us Are Dead and Train to Busan. All of those do touch on those things. So I'm like, sorry, but like, and then even I don't want to butcher his name. The director of Parasite,
Bong Joon-ho.
Yeah, his it sounds like Parasite, but it's not Parasite. It's this other film. It took me fucking ages to find it too. The kind of big mutant monster thing.
I've not seen any of his other stuff, to be honest.
Oh my god, yeah, fantastic.
I've heard he's a good filmmaker. I have been meaning to check.
Can't think of the name of it, but like someone pours chemicals down the drain, and this big giant monster comes out of it. The Host, I think it is. Because I know there's like a Western film called The Host.
He did make a film called The Host, I think.
And that has. I believe it's the dad from Parasite of the kind of the poor family as another character, and that again it works on class and kind of stuff.
To me, that was. I'm probably going to sound like basic white dude 101 here, but to me that was one of the most relatable parts of Parasite was the class divide. As somebody living in Tory Britain, I very much related to that. The rich versus the poor. It's the same in any country, I guess. But I just feel
but I don't think if other people really. It's like from the things that have maybe been highlighted by, Parasite winning the Oscar, fucking Train to Busan being really big on Netflix. Train to Busan just being named as one of the best films of like by word of mouth, one of the best films of the last couple of years, and then Squid Game being so popular and then even all of Us Are Dead were really big on Netflix. So like from the things that's presented to us, I think that's the one kind of recurring thing, and that's just what I'd heard, again by word of mouth. Because I guess like in the UK you do have more kind of class things, because class is more of a thing for you than it is for us really in Ireland, because
I think in Ireland it's more of a religious divide, whereas in Britain it's way more of a class financial divide.
I know Mark Maron talks about that a lot when he's talking, because like America doesn't have class when he's interviewing people from like the UK or whatever like that, or English people. Like in Ireland, I guess because we grew up like lower middle class. I think that's the kind of, my parents own 2 businesses, so I think that's the level of it. Like I'm not sure. So it wasn't, and a lot of my friends would be lower middle class. So I don't think we've much of a.
But there's something about that though when you're watching an international film, different language, different culture, whatever, and there's something like that in it that totally speaks to you and where you're from. It is kind of like, oh shit, like that stuff it transcends language and it transcends continents. It's just something that affects everybody, and
it's relative too. Like everyone has, like even if you are like whatever class you're from or whatever financial situation you're from, you're going to feel both ways in relation to someone else from another section from you. I'm just trying to, in the back of my mind now, I'm trying to see how we can turn this back to computer games. Well, maybe because we had computer games. And
BioShock is very class division. They definitely play on that. And that's based on Ayn Rand, who obviously was a very controversial class division person. Also, Zack Snyder was a big Ayn Rand fan as well, so that also ties into what you were talking about earlier. Yep.
But it just seems so Gary. Like, I think, like, because Ayn Rand, the main thing I hear about when I just think of Steve Ditko and like the vibes he had with Spidey at the start of it, and like Zack Snyder's an Ayn Rand fan. That seems kind of strange. Is she kind of is like libertarian thing?
Yeah, I think so. I don't really know that much about her philosophy, but yeah, I believe it.
I barely know what libertarian is. I'm just like, but, I know it's not liberal, but I think Joe Rogan is one. I'm not sure. Okay, we go on to the next. I think we did have another list of films. I know we didn't finish the end of that one.
No, we've got a couple more here. I don't really have too much to say about either of these.
Let me see.
So the last two, right? Mega Man. I've never ever been a Mega Man fan. I know that some people
played on a
those
demo
games.
on PS1. That's about it. I know. Is it Japanese or Chinese? Japanese.
It is Japanese. Although I have been hearing for years there was a project apparently in the works as a kids game. It's very, if you don't know, it's very colourful and kind of light blue costume and it was around the time of that Power Rangers Dark fan film. Remember they made a dark fan film where there's people get decapitated and stuff.
The guy?
It was really interesting.
The guy who produces loads of bootleg stuff.
Ari
Anker. The guy used to wear like the eye makeup.
Right.
Very, very interesting dude. Yeah, sorry, go on.
But I was around that era when that movie dropped. They were talking about doing a dark 3D Mega Man game, and it would be more along the lines of Titanfall, but it would be third person, so I guess more like Crysis. Well, no, Crysis is first person, but that kind of idea, a darker, more serious take on Mega Man, where you would play as this android fighting this horde of, I don't know, is it other robots or aliens that he fights? I don't know, I know too much about Mega Man, but the idea of a dark, gritty Mega Man game is interesting. If they would do that with a movie, I would probably see it. If they make it a kids movie, I probably won't, and I think they will make it a kids movie because that's what's hot now with Pikachu and Sonic, and they're going to do that with it, which is fair enough. I'm sure they'll make their money.
Yeah, I think I only played it where it was like it felt like something like, I don't know, like not exactly Candy Crush, but it was literally like you just planted bombs and you ran away and you to kind of clear the map.
Yeah,
so I learned it was PS1, and I definitely only played a demo of it. Actually, funny enough, speaking of dark versions of, I think Tom Holland said in an interview that maybe with the director of Uncharted, they were talking about making a dark dystopian Ratchet and Clank film.
Right.
Which sounded kind of strange. And like,
well, was there not a Ratchet film that came out, or at least was it cancelled? Was it in the works? Remember they rebooted it a couple of years ago, Ratchet and Clank? No. Around that time, they were making a movie. I don't know if it ever came out. I don't think it did.
Isn't there something else that's very similar to Ratchet and Clank? I don't know if they're maybe the same people.
Sly Cooper is very similar. I thought
there was another two that had like a blah 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 something.
Banjo and Kazooie.
No.
Banjo and Kazooie.
I thought it was something like even closer related to Ratchet and Clank, but
no.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm like, again, I've never really. I think I might have played the first Ratchet and Clank. I don't even know.
Yeah, I played it back in the day, and I did play the reboot, and the reboot is great. The reboot is
same guy as it's the same team behind the Spider-Man PS4, isn't it? It's not Insomniac.
Yes, it's Insomniac. Yep.
Did that come out first, and it has like a similar traversal thing, or I would think of something else?
What, Ratchet and Clank?
The Ratchet and Clank operated on a kind of web slinging. Is it like, did that come out before the Spider-Man PS4, and it has a kind of slightly similar traversal?
They made Ratchet, and then they made Spider-Man, and then they made the new Ratchet, which you can go between worlds, and then they did Miles Morales, and now they're doing Spider-Man 2 and Wolverine, because apparently they don't sleep.
Yeah. I was actually just web slinging a bit today, or was it yesterday?
But yeah, they've got a lot coming, which is interesting. But the last game here is an adaptation of a game called Beyond Good and Evil. My history with that, so the PS2 is my favourite console ever. That's my favourite era of gaming, and Beyond Good and Evil is a game that I remember playing back in the day and really enjoying. A couple of years ago, when I was in college, maybe 2016, 2017, something like that, I bought a PS2 again. I bought it off eBay, a used one, and I bought a bunch of games and kind of just dive back in to just see, am I wearing rose-tinted glasses or do these still hold up? And it was quite interesting because there was a few that really still hold up, better than I thought they would, and some that I loved back in the day that were utter garbage. Beyond Good and Evil, unfortunately, was one that I really struggled to.
Oh right,
to play.
I thought that was a new game. Did they reboot it recently?
No, there's a sequel that has been in development for about 20 years. That is still not out.
Because I'm aware of some game that's like, because as I mentioned on the previous pods, I was kind of out of proper console gaming for a while. There was some game with evil in the title. It was like a horror game that came out recently.
The Evil Within.
That's probably it. Yeah, there's like a witch in it or something.
Yeah. There's a kind of spider lady with long hair that chases you. And
so let me just Google Beyond Good and Evil.
Those were good. The Evil Within games were good. Beyond Good and Evil is a kind of fantasy, steampunky game, but there's like a talking pig, and you play as a female character. I can't remember her name. It's one of those games that has very vocal fans. People love that game, that first game. They've been begging for a game for 20 years and it's still not out. It keeps getting delayed and it's been on about 5 different consoles. People thought it was dead for a while through the PS3 era, and then towards the end of the PS4 era we heard that we were going to get it for PS5 and we're still waiting. So yeah.
Oh my god, there is. So Good and Evil 2, that's kind of like it's just been kind of locked in development or something, is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically Duke Nukem Forever at this point, or The Last Guardian. Like it's been in development for more than a decade anyway.
Doesn't ring any bells looking at it here.
So yeah, I don't know. Maybe focus on getting the sequel video game made before you find out about a movie. But I don't know, who am I? Do what you like. Okay. We have another page here of movies. We have been going for a while, Jerd. Will we continue this list and then do the TV shows in another episode? Because I feel like if we do all 4 lists here, we're going to be here till
I think the
8 p.m.
when I was looking at the TVs, it wasn't the TV
adaptions.
Ones, I was a little bit like that.
But if we want to discuss that, we can bring it up another week. But I reckon we should just part through these movies.
Yeah. But it's like some of them actually repeat there in the fucking. Sorry, we go on with the other list. Let me just get it up.
So, the top one, the first one, is probably the one that I have the most to say about on any of these lists here, and it's a Metal Gear Solid movie. This. If there's any story here that's ripe for a video game adaptation, it has got to be Metal Gear. Hideo Kojima has admitted himself in the past that he always wanted to be a film director and he couldn't get his foot in the door, which is why he started making games. So everything he makes basically is a movie that you play through. Metal Gear Solid is famous for its 4-hour cutscenes and shit like that. And that first game is just so iconic. It's my favourite game of all time. It's one of my favourite pieces of media ever, and I think an adaptation of it will be hard to do it the justice it deserves because there is so much to it. It's so dense, especially that first game. However, the first game, thankfully, because it came out 1998 when games were, it was one of the first games to really push the boundaries of what you can do in a video game in terms of storytelling. But yes, it only lasts. I think you can play through that first game in about 3 hours, 4 hours. It's not. In fact, no, 2.5, 3 hours. I think it takes you.
It takes me a bit longer. I only replayed it there during the first year of the pandemic.
I play it. I tend to play it once a year.
Really?
I played it. The last time I played it was actually on my phone. I've managed to get it on Android now.
Oh my god, that's fucking sacrilege.
Yeah, well, I kind of agree, but at the same time, I've played it like a million times. I was like, I know how this is meant to be experienced.
How I don't care.
I just want to play it. I'll show you later. It's a great
like adaptive control
PS1 emulator that you can.
Oh, you have the little things on the corner of the screen.
I played. I'll show you. I played through Pokemon Yellow as well because that's.
That's like
Yellow's
the old Game Boy game.
I played through that and I played
through grand. Like, there's no issue there at all.
But so the movie, it's going to be directed by the guy that made Kong. Skull Island,
I was literally
Jordan Roberts.
I was like trying to just like not to rehearse, but I was like, what am I going to say about Metal Gear Solid? I was like, I think it's directed by the guy who made Kong. I haven't seen Kong, so it doesn't really mean much to me. But he's buddies with Oscar Isaac, isn't he? And
yes.
It's actively in development. Oscar Isaac is playing Solid Snake.
Oscar Isaac is playing Solid Snake, and it's going to be, as far as I know, based on that first movie. In Sky Island, there was a couple of Easter eggs. There was a scene where they go into a boat, and the boat's called the Grey Fox. There might have been a reference to Shadow Moses at one point, but the guy that's made the film, right? I think Kong is his first movie, which always makes you a bit trepidatious.
You need a little...
An inexperienced filmmaker taking on a project like this could go either way. There's no really any way of predicting the outcome, but I think the fact that he's clearly a fan, he's clearly a massive fan of these games, he's grown up with them, he's invested in it, that helps tenfold. When you know it's somebody that is as much of a fan as you are, it gives you a bit more trust, I think, a bit more belief in them.
But hold on, Oscar Isaac wasn't in Kong, so how did they know each other?
I'm not sure how he was cast. I'm not sure if he was just...
Because in my head there, I was just painting the picture. I was like, oh, they probably got on really well when they're making that film, and they're like, I'm going to want to make this with you, and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, hold on, I don't think he's in that. So, yeah. And I know, didn't he approach Boss Logic to to mock up an image of what he would look like as Solid Snake?
Right. Yeah. Yes, that's right. Right, yeah.
It's interesting to see. I wonder do they have a prior relationship, or they'd met before, or whatever?
I reckon he probably just
approached him about
it. It was just kind of his choice.
I'm making this Kong to fucking just make this game, and I think you'd be perfect for it. Like, maybe it's like a big, like, if his references to it in Kong, maybe it's like this is his, like, he's gearing this up to be his magnum opus, and this is the whole reason he's doing anything.
Yeah. Like, that's Metal Gear Solid on the phone, by the way.
Man, that's not a phone though. That's like a fucking TV.
No, it's the Fold. It's the Galaxy Fold.
Fucking hell.
It opens to that.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's great for shit like that, for emulating stuff.
Christ, I didn't even know they made phones like that.
But yeah, it's got on-screen controls. I do have this that you're meant to put the phone in, but it only works for like certain games. I don't think Metal Gear's one of them, so you can't actually deal with it. Do
you know one thing about Metal Gear Solid that really kind of like, it's a very simple thing, but when you get it to that loading menu, it's not X.
Yeah.
Continue. That's where you know something's up. It's circle. You're like, what the fuck are you doing here? That's where when I was a kid, I was like, what? You blew my mind. And like, even when I was playing it on my emulator, I've like fucking Xbox controller. Every fucking time I'd like press X. I'm like, fucking doing it wrong.
What I'm curious to see in this adaptation, there's so many points in that game where they do things where they break the fourth wall, where Psycho Mantis reads the memory card and he vibrates your controller. How are you going to translate that into a cinematic experience? How are you going to translate that?
That's the kind of, like, I think in any game or any game film adaptation, there's that question of, do you do something to try and recreate that, or blah blah blah. But
like when the Doom movie did it, it just felt really forced when they had that section with Carl Urban was first person, and section, it just felt super cheesy.
Well, I think like what I was thinking, like I guess it doesn't really come into play as much in the first game, but it does. It's maybe more in story element. Like generally, the story of the first game is pretty straightforward, but it does have those gameplay elements that maybe the second game doesn't really have.
Relatively straightforward.
Well, the story itself in the first game is pretty by the number. Like it's like an espionage action film.
Yeah.
But in the second film, where they're like, "Oh, Raiden's whole thing here, this is just a training thing." Yeah. And then it's like that's where it starts getting really fucked up in the second one. But I can't even remember any moments really in the second game that are like that they have any kind of like, what's the word?
They have that in the third game. They have that sequence after you get tortured, after Big Boss is tortured and he's in the cell. If you save the game, close it and open it again, it's like a dream sequence, and you're running about this dojo as a samurai fighting these like ghost ninjas. And then
I never explained the third.
Yeah, and then he wakes up and he's like, "What the hell?" And he phones the colonel and he's like, "What was going on?"
Like,
it's just a dream. And
if you save before fighting a certain boss and just don't play it for a week, he dies of old age.
Yep, that happens too. Yep, in that third game, you can just put your system clock. You can just put your system clock forward a week and load it back up. And it dies. So yeah, it's
the second game doesn't really have anything like that, does it? But the story gets really fucked up in the second game because, and I don't know, is the third game like that at all? Like, story-wise?
The third one's the one that you can put the clock a week forward in the boss dice.
Well, that's more gameplay, isn't it?
And it's got the dream sequence, but yeah.
Because they're kind of two different elements, like, do you know what I mean? The second game, like, because we studied it in college, which is, I studied theatre and drama in college, and it's this German playwright called Brecht, who it's like, you know, so like, if anyone isn't
through Courtney, I'm aware of him, yeah.
Oh, because Courtney studied theatre also.
Yeah, she did acting, so yeah.
Yeah, so like it's, for anyone who's not aware, like my basic understanding of it is, a Brechtian play would be like, the actor would not even act and just read out the script or have a sign with dialogue on the stage, and it's like reading them are really fucking weird. I don't know, like it's the kind of height of arty pantsiness to the degree. You know, from the outside, that's what it feels like. It's, you know, I studied drama and I did plays, but I came to it in a very script and performing type of way, as opposed to like the, you know, the theatrical and the different movements and shit. But like, there's elements. So I guess, and I've seen video essays comparing it, Metal Gear Solid, to Brechtian stuff, where it's like, and I can't really, that element of like the actor having the script on a screen or whatever, or on a sign. I'm trying to, in my head now, I'm trying to like, how does that exactly fit into Metal Gear Solid?
I guess you could say the codec calls could be that.
There's like that active part of, yeah, but I'm not sure, like the performance of some of the elements are overly dramatic, which I'm kind of losing the analogies here, or the explanation of why Metal Gear Solid is actually Brechtian, but I'm kind of just trying to get a core nugget of a video essay that I watched before, but it's like Metal Gear Solid kind of goes on this kind of theatrical way of like let's just call it theatrical. We don't have to worry about the Brechtian, because I'm not fully sure of the definition of that. But like, they go on in maybe that's where it comes into in the second game, where it's like they're performing. This is the script of you are riding, and then like the fucking Colonel and the codex that's going all fucked up. But in the first game, they don't really have that as much. That is, it's maybe overly dramatic monologues and such, and like there is some kind of gameplay elements where you have to be, you know, Psycho Mantis raises your controller, stuff like that. I think they could just get across visually, like if we're getting away from the kind of how bizarre the story goes in the second game, but if we keep it to the first game, the Psycho Mantis stuff that could be just done visually and interestingly. Like Metal Gear Solid owes a lot to like cinematic moments and like the bits with the ninja. And like even with the ninja, like what is it? You have to beat the ninja with fists, which it's like I forgot about. Like you can't shoot him. You kind of can, but just fuck all to him. So like you're better off just fighting them. And the ninja, like talking about an iconic character. Like a lot of the first game could just be got across with like really good art design. And again, just like take the stuff that's in the game. Like in the game, first one takes a lot from Ghost in the Shell, which I didn't know. I was fucking so shocked to see. I only watched Ghost in the Shell in the last year. I was like, oh, that's the fucking final fight of Metal Gear Solid. Like, so.
I think we were speaking earlier also about Yakuza and stuff, and how East versus West storytelling styles and stuff and blends of genres. I think that is going to be the hardest part for John Vogt Roberts to nail here, is the tone. Because it does have such a strange mixed tone. I mean, you've got elements of comedy. You've got, I mean, Hideo Kojima is basically the opposite of a weeaboo. You know, he is an Asian gentleman that is obsessed with American culture, and that is why Metal Gear Solid is the way it is. And you know, you've got obviously you've got anime elements with like the ninja and Ghost in the Shell influences and stuff. You've got your kind of Rambo, you know, one man army type American.
Yeah, it's very Rambo.
Side.
Like. The Colonel is like the same model of that actor.
You've got certain comedy moments in it, certain humorous moments with Otacon peeing himself and stuff. You've got horror elements. I mean, with that first, I remember being young, and that first moment where you open that corridor after
the ninja,
Grey Foxes just went through it, and all these guys are lying bleeding to death and stumbled around saying, "No, it's a ghost that's killing us." Like that's horrific.
And the sound.
Yeah.
Like, you can do a lot with that, like Especially even for Psycho Mantis 2, you could do a lot with sound design there.
Yeah, the sound design. Yeah, Psycho Mantis was creepy too. So yeah, it blends so much, into this kind of one bizarre tone, and then you've got the kind of grandiose nature of like the clones of the greatest hero that ever lived, and that you've got that kind of overarching kind of larger side of the story as well, and you've got all this stuff happening in the background. The Patriots who are basically like the Illuminati in this world, and they're controlling everything, and this is we're all just puppets of them, and there's so many layers to it that that's going to be the hardest part to capture in a 2-hour film.
Yeah,
2.5 hour movie.
See, I think you could. I think you really could, and not to be bad about it or anything, but I think you could really just adapt it and just focus on the Western elements. You could.
I think the way to tackle it, right, I think we were kind of talking about this earlier, how you were saying the first game is not very straightforward, but out of all of them it's the most straightforward story-wise, and then the sequels add more elements and become more layered as it goes. You could probably do the same with the movies. You could probably start off and, as you're saying, just tell this story, Shadow Moses, get in to kill this guy who happens to be his clone brother and fighting the big Metal Gear robot at the end. Just tell that story, and then we can get into the lally lily low and the bizarre, over-the-top pantomime bullshit that it becomes.
It'd be a much bigger jump to do in a film.
Yeah.
Like, it was a big jump in the game, too, because, like, the second game, you're like, what the... Well, see, I think playing the first game, like, I'm still pissed off that you didn't get to play as Solid Snake in the second game. And you never really got to play as him accurately again. Nope. Like, which is just... And I know he's the clone of Big Boss, but Big Boss isn't Solid Snake. It's not the character I fell in love with.
Yep.
And I'm still pissed off about that. Like, I really am. Like, I know my nephew... So... For reference, just my two nephews I was talking about, one is really young, he plays like Fortnite and Minefield and all that, and my other nephew is like big into his obsessed with Metal Gear Solid, like big into his like the cues and stuff. But my nephew was saying it was to kind of portray Solid Snake as a bigger, larger than life character, but you never truly got to play as him again because now I didn't clock 4, but not to be ageist, but he still wasn't the Solid Snake he was in the first game. He was an older man. Even though he technically wasn't really, he's just at the age.
After that tanker sequence at the start of Metal Gear Solid 2, you never play as Solid Snake in his prime again, ever.
And I wouldn't mind, but you play as old boss way more after that, because you play as him in like 3, the PSP game.
Yeah.
5.
Yeah.
That it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, 5. Yeah, I guess technically 5's got a dumb twist to it, but that's why I've got my problems with 5. And one of my main issues, besides the fact that it wasn't finished and Konami and Kojima had this animosity which led to the public dirty laundry that it did, but besides all that, without getting into all that, I thought that the 5th game was going to end with obviously there's the first 2 games, Solid Snake, Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2 on the NSX, which came out before the PS1, which were like 2D side-scrollers. That was the original story of Solid Snake's first mission, and it was going into this military base to stop this guy who was going to launch missiles, who turned out to be his dad. It was very Star Wars. I am your father. It was Big Boss was behind it.
Yeah.
And then
was he not a clone in the original game?
He doesn't know that yet. I think he finds it out, and maybe at the end, even though it was just text and there wasn't any voices, and there was still monologues, and there was still overindulgence on Kojima's part. So I think during Big Boss's end boss baddie speech, I think he says something about how you're a clone or whatever. I thought they were going to reboot that story and make it 3D and do it with like on the Fox engine or whatever they're using now. They were going to end Metal Gear Solid 5, just kind of tie it up, because that's the only, if you go through it, I think Brecht is one of the guys that does the whole out of order storytelling thing. Is that him?
Even just remembering the name Brecht and the fact that that's all I've got for my degree anymore. That's all.
There's I'm sure Courtney would know, but there's one that does that. But anyway, that whole element of it, like obviously Metal Gear Solid as a saga isn't in order, but the only space of time that we haven't seen in HD is that the period between Metal Gear Solid 5 and Metal Gear Solid, between that Shadow Moses, and I always thought we were going to get that, and the fact we're probably never going to get that sucks.
Snake just showing up at the end of the game,
because you would get to play Solid Snake in his prime again, but yeah, we'll probably never get that.
Even just see him with a real puppy dog face kind of thing. Like.
Yeah, but yeah, listen, out of all the ones, although Bioshock's the one I'm kind of most certain will be good, I think Metal Gear Solid is the one that I have the most stock invested in. Like, that would hurt the most if it sucked.
I think you just make it as like a solid, like, I'm thinking like in my mind, Terminator 2 is one of the best films ever made for what it sets out to do.
Yeah.
I don't think a film has nailed its brief better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like I'm even saying that in regards to like action dramas, like there's certain films that obviously like do hit those marks too, but as far as well-known films, I really honestly think Terminator 2 is one of the best films ever made. And there's a certain element of action plus sci-fi there that I think X-Men 1 was kind of close to getting in some ways. I don't think it's as high a standard, and it's got some flaws, but I think X-Men 1 has elements of it where it's that kind of, and a little bit of that X-Men of that is probably fucking practical effects. Like a big part of Terminator 2, my love for it is the blend, the perfect storm of practical effects, not using that much CGI because there wasn't that much of it then. And I think fucking Metal Gear Solid could have, if they did it right, could touch on that. Just solid fucking story, good effects, good sci-fi, bit of horror, bit of love. It's a love story. It's not something like it's you can kind of maybe move away from some of the creepier elements of the dialogue that are like, ooh, that
haven't aged too well.
Yeah, or the fact that you could stare at Merlin until she blushed. You could have a character that's kind of Clint Eastwoody, like a hard ass who's, Wolverine. It's a very likable character, is a bit of a hard ass, but softens up towards the end of it. I think it's just so. To me, it has a lot of the elements that could make it like what I think is one of the best films ever made.
Yeah. And I like Oscar Isaac. I do. You obviously can't have David Hayter do it because he's not a live action actor and he's too old now. But I think the next best thing is someone like Oscar Isaac who can kind of, it's pretty much a chameleon and can pretty much do anything.
Was it 5 that the fucking for Sutherland in there?
Yes. Yep. That was number 5.
But David Hayter didn't actually end with it.
Yeah. That was.
I know a friend of mine who's, God bless him, he just loves everything. But he's like, oh, you gotta play it, man. It's the best game ever. I was like, oh, I feel like I have to play the other games before I play it.
5, right.
Maybe gameplay wise, is it?
We were speaking earlier about story v gameplay. For me, Metal Gear Solid has always been about the story, and you suffer through the awkward gameplay. Metal Gear Solid 5 has some of the best gameplay I've ever experienced in a game.
Yeah.
It's so tight. The shooting mechanics are great. The movement feels precise and purposeful, and it's not floaty at all. And when you miss a shot, it's your fault. And it's really well done that way. And the story is so lacking and so half finished and not there, and just so disappointing. And that's my main issue with it. If you're just wanting a game to play, listen to a podcast, play it on mute or something, you would have a great time with Metal Gear Solid 5. But that's not why I play Metal Gear. I play Metal Gear to experience
the game.
I think even story.
What I think of from the first game too is the way they treat the guns in the first game. There's something very iconic about like the SOCOM, the fucking.
The FAMAS.
I don't know what it is in real life. The FAMAS is actually a P90, isn't it? Or something?
I think so, yeah.
That kind of like, and I think even in Days Gone, you've this very similar. One of the first like proper guns you get is like that kind of the short snubbed gun, and even Peacemaker was just wrapped up there. You had a gun like that, where it's that kind of it's a long gun, but the nozzle and where your second hand goes, there's a very short space.
Yeah,
and it has that kind of curve.
Something else I always liked about the Metal Gear games is the fact that you don't start off with this arsenal of weapons. Like you've literally got your fists and a pack of cigarettes, and then you just need to find stuff as you go, and it just adds so much to it. So again,
come off the stairs.
So there you go. You're sorted for that infrared corridor.
I'll do the first mission anyway. So like that's great.
But yeah, 100%. I think that's something else that they need to nail. They need to just nail all that kind of. It's more capturing the tone, I think, and the feel, and then everything else is, you can forgive some story changes if they have to sort of reduce it for time or
reuse that score.
I can get round with things like that, but yeah, you need to capture the sound design and the tone. I think that's the most important thing for this adaptation.
The song. Do you know what I even like? I think I don't know if Oscar Isaac in any of them. You know the Sicario films?
Yes.
If you capture kind of an element of that to it.
Yeah.
That kind of like I feel like they have that very militaristic, hard-hitting like use of gunplay and stuff. Like some of those films are even like we're going to bring Chris Pratt back into like Black Hawk Down, where they have that kind of action where it's films like that where they have this very methodical shooting and like I think of other films that kind of have that vibe.
That it's not really like it's not guns blazing. Like every shot kind of counts for something, and
very like the action scenes. Maybe no score in some of the action scenes, just very like have the guns have weight to them, which as someone who's not like there's that beauty of gunplay in like fiction that you're like, oh, that's so cool, but then in real life you're like, that's not cool at all. But then even like I don't even know if I've experienced that in the Metal Gear games, but games where when you fire off fucking 4 shots of even of an assault rifle, it just feels it has that kind of weight to it. I think Sicario films have that. Like some films, they kind of glorify gunplay in a very practical, but it's not really like the gunplay isn't really theatrical, but this is a solid weight to it, and like I don't know, like I when I was looking at the like not that I've seen much of it, but the fucking what's it, the Cyberpunk.
Yep.
They have kind of elements of it, or I don't know. Sorry, it doesn't. I haven't played them. I haven't watched the game that much, but it feels like it's the kind of game that should have that very. You've got an assault rifle. It's just like the Far Cry games have that solid gunplay. You kind of get that across in like. That I don't know. There's a certain reverence for the gunplay. But again, he's not really trying to do gunplay all the time. So you can have these more inventive scenes where.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It would be interesting. I think it would be interesting the first time you see it because it's only been recently, the last kind of few times that I've played it, that I've tried to play it stealthily. My go-to is grab a FAMAS and run it in the room and shoot every soldier in it, and then run away from the alarm and hide. That's my kind of way of playing these games. So obviously that's not how they're intended to be played. They are intended to be stealth experiences. So. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they tackle that in the movie, like him getting caught by security cameras and shit, and
and then you have elements of like, sometimes it's like if a character can, have a little monologue it can be something kind of, it's not to be the ground epic thing, but if it's kind of a cheat sometimes if you can tell an interesting story in a film. So some kind of like in Metal Gear is kind of a lot for that, where they just talk about some random factoid or some random piece of information.
There's a lot of that, especially in that first game. There's a lot of 2 years ago when the scientists were experimenting on this rocket in the Middle East, and you're like, what has this got to do with anything that we're, you know what I mean? And then eventually it'll get tied in later. At the very last sentence, he'll be like, and that's why this happened and this. And it's like, Kojima obviously, the way his mind works, they had to justify everything in the game because based on real life stuff, he had to go back and he probably spent hours sitting researching rocket tests and DNA implementation and things. I would imagine he's the kind of guy that probably does his research, and then instead of just being like, right, that exists in the real world, so I'm okay to put it in the game, he actually has to show you a 2-hour demonstration to then be like, right, that's why they've got it in Shadow Moses, and you're like, right, okay, we get it, big man. Like it is a bit excessive in that sense. If you go back and quite often, because I've played it so many times, I will skip the cutscenes now. If you go back and watch every cutscene, it does feel a bit like a lecture sometimes. And
like, okay. I know.
They can cut around a lot of that. They can cut around a lot of that for the.
But even I think just even having that, like, there's one thing I find about like some films. Sometimes it's like literally just something the character is saying. I find very interesting, and they could have something like that where it's just like, I don't know, that's an element of storytelling where it's kind of cheating, but it's like, oh, that is a kind of interesting story, or that kind of thing. Or what was I thinking there? Just as you were saying. Oh, I fucking lost it.
I feel like we should have gave Metal Gear Solid its own episode.
Yeah, because we talked about it before. I know we talked about it in our game episode. We talked about it.
I do have a fan casting list on my phone somewhere, so we could definitely do that one week.
So it's like what, 3 Oscar Isaacs?
You
can't do that. That's the thing. It's like with the superhero stuff now, with the multiversal stuff, going back to previous franchises. They're like, well, why do you? It never comes up. Why do you look different for the comic? They're drawn the same, but how do you? You can't really get around the whole idea of not recognizing someone's your fucking clone.
Yeah,
it doesn't really work.
Well, that's the thing. What they're going to do with Liquid, because he has maybe a direct copy, a clone, so you're just going to have him doing an English accent. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't make that decision.
Yeah. Well, I guess you could have like clones from the same genetic material but mixed with someone else, or
yeah. So yeah, the next list title here is Just Cause. Just Cause games are they're fun, open world, everything explodes. You play as a guy called Rico Rodriguez who is liberating different parts.
Same guy the whole time.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Unless is it a different guy in the first one? I think it's the same guy in the first one. It's definitely the same guy through 2, 3, 4, and is there a fifth? I feel like there's a fifth.
I don't know. I played one or two. That was one of those games where it was like it just seemed fucking daft. I could see that the gameplay was really enjoyable, but I was like, I'm not really getting invested in this game because
they are fun. If you like a checklist type game, like Ubisoft type, like take over this base and that base and that space, and you get that part of the map unlocked, and then you fight the boss baddie for that part of the map, and then you go to the next section and you do the same. It's very checklisty that way. But if you enjoy games like that, like Far Cry or like I don't know, Assassin's Creed, if you like that sort of checklisty type gameplay, it's that but with way more explosions.
What are the bosses like? Are the bosses like stronger than regular villains, or?
It's kind of like you were saying earlier, how the game doesn't really change for the boss fights. It's just they have more health, they're more bullet spongy.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Maybe I could try it again. That's the one where you like. I remember my mate was saying before, it was like, oh well, if you use your grappling hook with the parachute, you can basically fly or whatever. Like.
Yeah.
So I was like, that kind of stuff. And then, a bit like.
And then by the fourth game, you can just fly because they give you a wingsuit. So you can literally just equip the wingsuit and use a grappling hook and just pull yourself along. So you can just fly by the fourth game. But do you know what? It's fun as hell. It's not to be taken seriously. It's not. It's never going to win any story awards. It's not the most original concept. But it's entertaining. You're taking down dictators in every game. You're fighting through these kind of exotic, lush environments. You're pulling down statues and you're blowing up helicopters and military compounds and cutting off supplies for their fuel, and it's fun. It's checklisty, it's arcadey, you are pretty much a superhero. The gunplay has never been great. It very much feels like you just put the cursor on the bad guy's head and pull the trigger. Like it doesn't feel, there's not much to it, but it's not really the point. The point, is just how bombastic it is and how you can do that. You can pull the trigger on somebody, and then you can look up and see a chopper and zip line up to the chopper, rip the guy out and jump in yourself, and then start firing rockets, and then jump out the chopper and parachute. It's all that together that makes up Just Cause. It's not just the gunplay. It's not just the fact that you can use a grappling hook. It's when you start combining all that stuff that it becomes really fun.
Like and GTA is kind of like the gunplay by itself, and GTA isn't really that great. Like.
But yeah, I enjoy the games. I don't really know how they're going to adapt it into a sort of series. Not even a series movie, but just into a movie, into a kind of narrative. But
that kind of thing where it's like, do you really need to? I guess you're going with brand recognition to a certain point, but it's just like, look, it'll just be fun.
Yeah.
It'll be like.
I don't really have much. I don't care either way whether it's good or not. I'll probably see it, but yeah.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing now I don't think it would interest me. Kind of the way the games wouldn't interest me. It'd just be like.
Yeah. Right, the next one I have very little experience with, actually. It's a huge franchise, but the Gears of War games have never been my thing. I never had a 360 until about 8 years after it came out. I think I bought the 360 just before the Xbox One dropped. So I have played the first Gears of War game, and I've played. So my pals, when I was a teenager, all my friends were into Gears of War. They were Xbox guys. So I did play like 2 or 3 the odd night when I was up at their house one weekend, half cut after a few years at 17. Do you know what I mean? That was kind of my experience with Gears of War up until, I think just before the Xbox One came out. I was like, I'm going to buy a 360 and kind of go back to the library that I missed, Crackdown and what other games are Xbox exclusive, Gears of War and Halo, and I was like, I'm going to go back and play all these games and see what it was all about. And I it was one of those cases where it was just past its time. I tried to play the first Gears of War, and it felt dated and blocky, and everything was just chest, like knee height cover that you had behind, and you popped out short. And you had that was the whole first game. I didn't even finish it.
It was the first wave of games like that, wasn't it? Where it was
well, I played halfway through that first game, and I was like, okay, this is kind of samey. So I was like, I must get better as it goes on. So I've tried to play the second or maybe the third one, but because I didn't give a shit about any of the story elements, those are very heavily focused on what happened, like the relationship you've built with the characters through that first game. You kind of need that to enjoy the second and third game. So when they're all like, oh, this guy died, and it's a pure, emotional moment, I'm like, I don't care. I played with him for half an hour in the first game, and I think it was something you had to experience at the time and really get invested in. And I never did.
Someone's on about the in one of the comic book groups I made about the Walt Simonson tour run that introduced Better Ray Bill, and it's like oh, I tried to read it, and it was just like it felt really slow, and the story seemed stupid. I was like, and it's something I hate trying to capture, because I generally can't capture the greatness of classics, because I've read or played or whatever things that are too evolved. And I can't appreciate them for what they are. Like I read the Claremont era X-Men, but I'm like, it's a fucking slog. But I think especially when you go back to the giant size X-Men stuff, it's like I can appreciate that just because, well, Banshee's in it. I've covered how much of an obsessive I am with Banshee. But when you go back far enough, you can enjoy stuff. But if it's two reasons, you're like, it's too much of a struggle to appreciate them, I think.
Well, I would even also say, though, that's kind of what I feel about Citizen Kane. Everybody goes on about how that's the greatest movie ever made.
It was boring as fuck, yeah.
But it spawns so much, it's responsible for so much that came after it.
Certain levels of realism.
It is quite interesting to experience the original and see where it goes. It's like, I guess it's like the Beatles in it. Like, I love the Beatles, but a lot of people don't, and all the Beatles are is the reason that so many other groups came after them and tried to do the same thing, and then it evolved to where we are today. So it is interesting to go back and see it, focus on a cultural touch point and see how it's kind of grown from there. But
with music, I have no issue going back, because to me, like, I can happily listen to, like, not that I fucking do it all the time, but like I can happily listen to classical music. So music, I don't really have that thing. I think film has changed so much that like, and I love throwback music now. There's a song, what's the fucking beat? No, never mind. Yeah, but I tried my hardest. I just thought Citizen Kane was the most boring. I was like, it was, to me, it was like playing a PS1 game, which I know some people would shoot me just for that thought, but like, I was just like, what? It's like, our PS3, it's like, it has the elements of things that are coming forward, but it's just in the most basic way. I don't know. So I find it very hard to appreciate classics. Gears of War, I guess, as anyone would say, oh yeah, put Dave Bautista in it. Put The Rock in it.
Well, I think
like that.
For a few years, Bautista was a fan casting for, is it Marcus, the main character's name?
Possibly, yeah.
Bautista has been fan casted as that character for a good long time. However, Bautista is now in his 50s, so he was being fan casted 10 years ago when he was at the perfect age. He has possibly aged out of it, but he's still fit. He's still in shape. I'm sure he can still be the lead in an action movie. I'm not saying that he's past it or anything, but I just wonder if they would go with him as a different character instead. Because maybe he's aged out with that lead role, and they might cast him. I don't know. Maybe he's more of a mentor character.
I don't know. I guess
I think he's meant to be middle aged. He's meant to be in his 40s. Like when they were talking about making this 10 years ago, Dave Bautista would have been perfect.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of thing that you could play. It's kind of like, if you try and treat it like, so I only played, was it Doom 2016? If you just treated that as like just balls to the fucking wall action. What would be a good analogy for something similar that you could just like I think the thing is with a lot of these games is just like, I don't know, what's a good film that's just like fucking gnarly fucking action that just has you thrilled the whole time? Maybe something like a little bit like, what?
The Raid?
Kind of, like, that's, I think the whole thing with Gears of War and their characters, they're all big, blocky, and like...
Oh, right, sure.
It's nearly like a kind of a neo fucking throwback to the 80s action stars, where like, they're actively like, these are the kind of soldiers they want now, who are like, big, blocky fuckers who can
like
carry all this.
Or whatever.
Yeah, that kind of thing, of like, well, I guess make it Predator, like, but just reboot Predator, do good.
Do good, although I just realised I'm talking about Dave Bautista's age. Oscar Isaac is in his 40s, and I think in the original Metal Gear Solid Snake is like 35. So if you want to split hairs, you could even say that he's too old to be Snake. So as you're saying,
I don't live in a world where I'm older than Solid Snake.
They can they can age up and age down as appropriate.
And games is a lot harder to appreciate their age. It's like
that's the other thing.
Graphics
Also,
or whatever.
Especially Metal Gear Solid 1.
Yeah.
You know, so that's right. So next one, Call of Duty. I've heard rumours of a Call of Duty game for years. Those games, campaign-wise, are just a shooting gallery. Like that is all there is to it. I think the fourth one was the last one to really bring some innovation to the market. Since then they've been trying to kind of recapture it. And I've enjoyed some of those games. I enjoyed the first Black Ops game. It's the best mechanically. It's the best shooter on the market in my opinion. It just feels good. The guns feel good. The aiming and the sniping, and you know, it feels good to use those guns. It has got the best, you know, gameplay, first person shooting on the market in my opinion. Adapt it into a movie. I mean, how do you do that? Do you go with a classic World War II movie? In which case, how do you make it original? How do you do something new with that? Or do you do a modern day, you know, kind of Afghanistan type, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare type? How do you tackle it? What do you think?
I'm trying to think. I came to, like, I think it was Xbox 360, so I probably played like Battlefield Bad Company too. And I don't know we're always talking about Call of Duty, but like when I
enjoyed the Bad Company games, those were good. When
I kind of came to it, Call of Duty, like it has that kind of like Pro Evolution Soccer, fucking FIFA vibe, where I came to it at a certain point where Call of Duty was seen as being way more, or from my experience of it, Call of Duty was way more arcadey, and Battlefield had that element of like aiming for a certain level of realism.
Yeah.
So like I remember just playing, I think it was Bad Company too on the Xbox 360, where like I remember just my experience of it was going into a house, shooting out the window, and I was in like aim mode. The next thing I'm like, I'm getting hit, and I took the gun down, and the wall was completely gone in front of me. So I was like, fucking hell! And that was always my little anecdote if I ever wanted to say why I enjoyed Battlefield more than Call of Duty, because it had this more visceral kind of certain level of treatment of physics, and like the fact that you could just break down a wall or whatever in front of you, or that kind of thing. So like, I guess kind of getting away from Call of Duty, but like, I think maybe if you were to do a Battlefield game, you would maybe try and work it. If that's the kind of element you want this visceral kind of like, and it's like in films too, where you're watching a war film, and sometimes it just has that fucking bang of realism off it, where it's like it feels visceral when you're watching it. Now Call of Duty, from my mind, Call of Duty was always the arcadey kind of thing. So something arcadey, like you don't really want an arcadey fucking. You don't really want an arcadey war film to watch. But now maybe I'm thinking of like, I don't know what, like, to me, in my experience at that point, I know it kind of flipped and flopped. The same with Pro Evolution Soccer and FIFA. FIFA was less realism. Pro was more. I took them as very good analogs for each other at a certain point, at least. That Pro was very methodical and to the point, and had a certain level of realism, where FIFA was a little bit more arcadey. I don't know if did Call of Duty ever come around to that, where it stopped being so arcadey and it became a bit more practical.
No, it's always been bombastic, and it's always been somewhat arcadey.
Did Call of Duty have the ghost guy, or was that?
Yeah, that was COD. Yeah, I never played that one, Ghosts, but yeah, that was one of those games.
Yeah, I remember there was a bit of a story to that. So like maybe you want to try and focus on. And if it's arcadey, I don't think you really like. If you're gonna make something that's war, like, do you really want it to kind of sanitize it and make it like cartoony and it's war? Like that seems like a.
I think
you gotta focus on the characters. I think then, if that's the case.
But whenever I talk about Call of Duty with somebody that's not really into gaming or first-person shooters, you kind of forget how. Like I was mentioned earlier, how those games are just a shooting gallery. The reason I kind of came to that conclusion once and for all, like, although I'm not saying they haven't innovated, the COD Zombies is innovative. Call of Duty 4 for online first person, gameplay that's the king still. Warzone during lockdown, playing Warzone with your mates was a huge kind of revelation across the gaming industry and the gaming market. However, the campaigns are a shooting gallery quite literally, because there was one night I was sitting with Courtney and that she hadn't no experience with these games, right? And I think she just got a PS4 because she got a PS4 a couple of years after we started going out. And when the game, she was like, "What should I play? What should I try?" And I was like, "Try Call of Duty." So because it's kind of mass market mainstream games, so we put it in, and it was the one with Kevin Spacey before all the Kevin Spacey shit came out. It was the one with him, and we're playing it, and we were about 4 or 5 missions in, and Courtney was like, "This is really samey. Is this all that is?" And I was like, "Pretty much, it's Call of Duty." And she was like, "It is just like a shooting gallery. The only thing is the targets have been made into 3D guys and given maybe some dialogue as you shoot them, but that's literally move from this point to that point and shoot the targets in front of you and then go to the next one, and that is all they are." So yeah, I've always found that kind of fascinating to just hear that so directly for somebody outside of the the kind of echo chamber, just to be like, it's just a shooting gallery. However, I think out of all these movies that we've talked about and different ideas and projects and IPs, I think if any of them are going to be Oscar bait, I think you could do an Oscar bait Call of Duty movie. Do something like 1917 and make it super heartfelt and somber and show the horrors of war and make it, and bring it out in November, right in time for Oscar season. And I think that might be the best way to tackle it. Give it to someone like Steven Spielberg or Sam Mendes, or somebody that's made a decent war film, and just be like, stick the Call of Duty name on it and sail it that way.
Well, would you not like kind of cheapen it by making it like, especially Call of Duty's this arcadey game? Like, what's the reasoning behind, beyond brand recognition? That's going to just bring, really, like, Call of Duty is just going to bring in like gaming bros, no? Like, it's
agreed, but honestly, for me,
because gaming bros are getting older, so like,
yeah,
Oscar films are aimed at the main the
middle-aged audience, anyway. Yeah. The thing with Call of Duty, right, and it is just a small thing because it's became so ingrained in our pop culture, I think. See the title of that game, Call of Duty, like, that is quite a serious name when you think about it. Like, what is the Call of Duty? It's the call for you to go and defend your country. That is quite a serious
Medal of Honor. Like, it's a little bit more antiquated, but like, you could make it a Medal of Honor. Did the Medal of Honor ever go modern day?
It did. They made 2 modern day Medal of Honor games, which I enjoyed and no one else did.
I fucking love the Medal of Honor games back in the day. But they were more single player. That was before we really did. I guess they had multiplayer co-op, but like, that was couch co-op or whatever.
Yeah. But yeah, just for me, I think that's because, as you're saying, I don't think you can do it arcadey and cheesy and kind of.
I'm surprised there isn't a Call of Duty 90s war film already. Like,
and I feel there's so many other ones out there. Like American Sniper could be a Call of Duty movie. Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of like, and I guess Saving Private Ryan.
That's based on a bit of a lunatic. Saving Private Ryan, in my mind, is Medal of Honor.
Think so, more than Call of Duty, yeah. But like,
but that's only because I'm coming from a PS2 Medal of Honor frame of mind.
I'm just trying to picture how you make this unique. Like, how do you do something different from Saving Private Ryan, or how do you do something different from American Sniper? Like, those are like, that's your kind of World War II war movie, and then your modern day war movie. How do you make something? Do you go into the future and make it ridiculous and bombastic?
Have wide range appeal, because in a game, Call of Duty is just a fucking game, and like, it's a shooting game, so like, we'll get some game has to be an army game. But how do you make it a film if you want to make it kind of that more dramatic route and you want to make it more character based?
Yeah.
Like, especially because then there's that weird kind of divide when you cross over to film, because film is generally more, you don't get many films aimed at like the right wing pro army people. Like, I'm sure there's pro army people on the left too, but gun culture people. Like, when you cross over into cinema and television, there's not that many who would try and go for that number. Like, we try and it's it's generally.
So are you saying it would suit more of a Michael Bay than it would Steven Spielberg?
Yeah, Michael Bay kind of maybe is Zack Snyder, but like, if Zack Snyder's not doing something that's a bit genre, I guess war can be genre too. Like, but what is the guy who made the fucking? Why doesn't fucking Mark Wahlberg keep coming up in this? What was the film?
What, Survivor?
No,
No,
what's the
Monster.
one? The earlier one. What's the earlier one? Three guys, Three Kings.
Oh right, yeah. Not seen it, but yeah, George Clooney, right? And
George Clooney. Like I remember
yeah,
watching it, and it was one of those
Ice Cube.
films.
Is Ice Cube one of them?
I think so.
Yeah.
I remember watching that kind of a bit later, and I was like, "This is a bit shit." But like, like I think it got like kind of Oscar bait. And, like
Right.
Marin was interviewing fucking George Clooney recently, and he was talking about it. I was like, "You could go for it that way." Like, I don't. The only thing I can vaguely remember about Call of Duty is Ghost, but like. And it's funny to say, like, oh well, people, people don't really care about war isn't really as glorified a topic anymore as it was, but like it is in like you have Zero Dark 30, that's like fairly recent, it was based on fucking capturing Obama.
Yeah.
The Marvel films, are like any they're certainly kind of pro-military to a degree. Like when you have the
Yeah.
Avengers with the militaristic music, Captain Marvel. People say any film that has the military in it. Like Iron Man is very military. Like
Tony Stark.
if you're seeing military vehicles, that film is being backed with the military. So while it mightn't
Though,
be,
though Tony Stark's whole kind of character development is getting away from the whole arms dealing thing and becoming more of a giver, rather than being all about himself.
kind
That's
of,
kind of
but
his arc.
Rhodey's always kind of in that line. Like
Yeah.
Rhodey's a military man. Cap,
Yeah.
both caps.
And then what's he called? General Ross as well. Get him overseeing.
He's kind of shown as
stuff.
a villain, but like when you think of it, like the most recent is like any Captain America, but like fucking Mackey's Sam Wilson as military as they come, like.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
so
Falcon,
is Rhodey, and like Captain Marvel's very military based. Shield, the whole idea of that, like we're getting a Shield show soon.
Yeah.
That's like they're always used as foils, but like I guess you're gonna have to have a squadron of people. Ghost is going to be one of them. Like I don't know Call of Duty that well. I haven't played in years.
There was Sergeant Price. He was like the iconic kind of mentor slash villain character, I think, from the Modern Warfare games. I think he starts off as like your mentor, and then he turns on you, and it's a big twist, and it's like, oh, he's a bad
Sure,
guy.
look, was
it Soap? I think it was Soap. I think Sergeant Price was the guy that was good that died. I don't remember, but
like
Soap
we just spent nearly an hour, like
characters,
45 minutes talking about how cool a Metal Gear Solid film would be, but if you strip some of that back and you don't have the same exact kind of story elements, but you just have a very solid action film with guns.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't think any of us are like. Well, it's a bit different for yourselves. Like we don't really have a military in Ireland. Like so, like we don't really have that. We're pulled back. Like we didn't really, even though there has been elements of us fighting in English wars or whatever. But if you just make us like I'm not exactly pro-military in any kind of sense, but you just have a solid action film with go for that element too of like just make it. But then again, like that's nearly away from the Call of Duty ethos.
Ethos, yeah.
Mentos, it's a fresh maker. If that's away from Call of Duty, because they have arcadey gameplay. Like I'm more like I just kind of have Battlefield stuck in my head.
I think the safest way to get away from the whole debate whether you're pro-military or anti-military, because I don't think that's what this movie's going to focus on, and I don't think it should, because that's not who it's for. I think they should probably instead focus on the relationships between the characters. Like, it should be a whole kind of brothers. There was a series called Brothers in Arms as well. There should be that whole mentality, the kind of Brothers in Arms thing about these guys going to war together. And if we go to a modern day one, I guess you could have like, you could have cutaways to different cultures and different. You could go along those lines. That would be interesting to see a Call of Duty game from a non-American perspective. I don't think we're going to get that with the first one, but that could be interesting to see at some point. Because that's what I always liked about some of the COD games. You would play as like the Americans for a couple of missions, and then the Russians, and then the Japanese, and then you would see it for different perspectives. So something like that could be interesting to try and incorporate that as well.
Like I think it's the same kind of thing. You could really just like I'm mainly going by the gameplay being arcadey. Just like Fast and the Furious are very popular films. Do that thing, not cars, just war, and you can have a multicultural cast. Like that's what fucking Fast and Furious has become. It is completely multicultural cast, isn't it? It's like they do so well in other countries because yes, there is a lot of Americans, people of lots of different ethnicities in those films.
Yeah, I guess. But I think the great thing about Fast and Furious managing that is that it never ever felt forced. Like these characters being introduced from different countries, I will say that for Fast and Furious, as sloppily written as some of it is, they never forcibly be like, oh, let's go to this country and hire this person because we don't have somebody from that background. You know, it never feels as obvious as that, as broadcasted as that. It always feels more natural. So yeah, to give Fast and Furious some credit, they've always managed that fairly well, I think.
You do, like, in any kind of war situation, you're going to have people from different countries mixing. And then, like my way to just work in talking about Giant Size X-Men again, that's what that multicultural team was created because the comics were selling well in those countries, so they're like, let's fucking play up on that. And, like, yes, it's kind of commercial, and yes, it's fucking... But, like, you know, that commercial, like, that way of kind of weaponizing multiculturalism provides representation, and there's because it makes money in those countries or whatever, there's a positivity to that too.
There was a game that came out last generation, well, 2 generations ago now, for PS3, called Spec Ops: The Line, and Spec Ops: The Line was, to me, it's the best story ever told in a military shooter. The narrative to that game is incredible. It's somewhat based on Heart of Darkness / Apocalypse Now, but it's told in the modern day. Dubai has been taken over by a dictator, and you know, you're an American soldier who has to go in and take out the leader of this faction. Turns out the leader is an American ex-soldier, kind of like Apocalypse Now, Marlon Brando's character, who you have to go and get rid of, basically Colonel Kurtz, or and it's very Fight Club as well, a lot of it. You know, kind of voices in your head, and PTSD plays a big part in it, and there's these sandstorms that roll across Dubai as they do in real life, but some of them are kind of dream sequences, and it plays with what's real and what's not at certain sections, and it just does so much for a war shooter, so much more than you ever thought. It shows you the horrors of war. I mean, there's a scene where you basically have to drop white phosphorus on this area of the map to get to the next section, but turns out there was a bunker underneath that section that was housing civilians, so you've just wiped out an entire civilization, an entire town's worth of civilians, and then you have to walk through their rotten bodies to get to the next section of the game. And it really makes you kind of take in the consequences of war, and how far do you go to do the right thing, and it plays on all of that. And then you've also got sections where you do kind of get a choice on what to do and what to, you know, whether to kill somebody or let them live, or also it's just the fact alone that because you're fighting this faction of American soldiers who've kind of broke away, the fact that you're killing guys with American accents, that's so rare in games, in war games. You're always shooting someone.
You say who you play as?
You play as a guy called Cole Walker or something, and he just starts off as generic military guy, but as it goes, he starts to kind of doubt his duty and why he's there, and is he doing the right thing, and who is in the right here. Like, obviously the guy who's trying to take down as a psychopath, but are the government any better, are the military any better? And that's kind of emphasised in certain dream sequence sections. And then he makes certain decisions. He's got 2 other soldiers with him. It's a team of 3, and the other 2 question him at certain points, to the point where some scenes are pointing guns at each other, like, no, we have to kill this guy, or no, you can't kill this guy. It gets really intense, and the acting's really good. The performances are great. The main character's voiced by Nolan North, who does a phenomenal job, as he always does, with the character. And if you want to experience a brilliant single player military game, I would seek out Spec Ops: The Line. I don't know if you can get it on PS4 or PS5, but you can definitely get it on PS3. And I'm pretty sure you can get it on PC. And it is by far the best story experience I've ever played through in a military game. And it does stuff with the genre that I didn't realise was possible. You know, it introduces horror elements, it's almost supernatural elements, but also the dream sequences. But it kind of plays with that as well, and it's super like ethereal. It's even though it's taking place in the real world, and it does feel visceral when you're like, there's the part where you walk through the bodies. I mean, there's bodies of children lying. There's like a playground you walk past, and it's all these kids, and their faces have all melted off, and it's horrific. But it's effective. You know, it is effective. It's a solid game. Pure fun under the radar. Not many people. I think people who played it loved it, but not enough people played it to merit, doing another one or whatever.
Like getting a series of them, a full series of
them. But yeah, something like that, I guess, would be a cool place to look. I don't know if you like with that dark Call of Duty game, but yeah.
Yeah, and you've also got War. Like War is, what is it good for? But like that's what the game is based on. Even if the games are a little bit arcadey and stuff, like they do have not that I've played a crazy amount of them. I'm sure there's elements of that to the War Call of Duty games in like the story mode and such.
Yeah.
The Juggernaut is a part of those challenge modes in Call of Duty games, isn't it? The guy who's all like wrapped up in.
Well, I know that speaking
body
from
armor and stuff, or is that
speaking from no, but in Warzone you get a Juggernaut mode where the Juggernaut gets dropped on the map.
Yeah, you're like fighting a wave, and then like the Juggernaut gets shot at the end.
It drops like a crate, and then you have to try and get to the crate, and whoever gets it first becomes a Juggernaut. And then you've got like a bunch of health and a minigun. And you
I can't remember which one I was playing, but I just remember that element.
Yeah, I've got the Juggernaut's up there.
Juggernaut. Like that's a great scene in the film.
Yeah.
Or you have to become the Juggernaut. Like you're towards the end of the fucking the final action piece. You're trying to get to the fucking helicopter or whatever. You become the Juggernaut, or you have to take out like 20 guys with the machine gun, or you have to take out. That's the story. Like you can play that both ways. Your team mostly gets killed. Like you just have a great action scene where you have and that's one thing that I always loved. Kind of bringing it back to Terminator, I always thought that'd be a cool element in like the GTA game where they just release a Terminator type guy. I have to do that every episode. They release like a Terminator level guy where he's just in past. You have to try and like maybe not so much with a car and stuff, but like you have to try your best to take out this fucking tank of a guy.
Yeah,
and like that's tension right there. Like he's taking out people. You could. Depending on how far you want to stretch that, you have to take out as many. Like, what game was it? No, I'm sure it probably does exist somewhere in the Call of Duty games. But the you got your explosive barrels type thing. But wasn't it? I think it's actually in Lethal Weapon, but it was in the Siphon Filter games where you're fighting a guy covered in body armor and he's got a flamethrower, and you have to shoot the tanks on his back.
Right.
Like, maybe that's an element of I know I don't think explosions actually work that way, but like. This Juggernaut guy, you've only got a handgun to take him out and a grenade or whatever. Like I know they do that in something like Deadpool had that element where he's only got 10 bullets.
He forgets his guns, yeah.
Yeah. So like maybe you have to shoot up a barrel. I know barrels again don't work like that, but I'm sure if you shot the petrol tank with a gun, would that not explode?
I'm not sure.
I don't know. Maybe not.
Video games told me it has, but I don't think it would. No.
Maybe elements of that, like where like or for the last stretch, they have to get to take out like 20 guys. You have to armor up like a motherfucker.
Yeah.
To become the Juggernaut, or you have to fight a Juggernaut at the end of the game or whatever.
But I think doing something like that, I would work in like maybe an indie war film, whereas you're saying like if there's just a scene where he's got a pistol or grenade or whatever. I don't see if you give it to someone like Michael Bay, I don't see them making it as small as that. I think it would have to be way more grand. I think like the whole thing in Deadpool when only having the 10 bullets, that was a budget thing. That was because they didn't have enough, money to have a big action sequence, so they gave him the 10 bullets.
Oh really?
That was an actual budget restriction, and but it resulted in a pure creative sequence. Whereas if you've got somebody like Michael Bay that's got bottomless pockets and an unlimited budget, you're not going to get stuff like that.
He's going to be going around with an assault rifle
large
with
scale,
unlimited bullets. Like that'd be great. Just like have accurate bullets. Well, I guess it's going to be. That's not what Call of Duty is. I think any game to film an adaptation is going to have that element of like it has to be this really heightened reality.
Heightened reality.
I think ideally they wouldn't, but like, fuck it.
Well, speaking of different realities, I think we could do the next two together. We've got Half-Life and Portal, which are both Valve games. I don't know your experience with the Half-Life and Portal games.
I played a bit of Half-Life 2, maybe.
Right.
And very little. And I am aware of Portal. I've seen many memes where people make Christmas trees. True, like Portal. But they're not related story-wise, are they?
it's the same universe. It's not the same. Yeah, it's not the same time, but there's a fan theory that basically suggests that before Half-Life, so Half-Life is like the alien invasion of Earth, right? And these aliens kind of take over the world.
And things that get on people's face.
Yeah, and it's basically these scientists that are trying to stop them. And there's there's the whole kind of 1984 side to it as well, that the government are these kind of like faceless stormtroopers and these creepy G-men that are behind everything. And so there's that side to it. And then Portal obviously takes place in an underground bunker, and then I assume it's like thousands of years in the future. So there's the idea that Gordon Freeman from Half-Life might have made these bunkers, the Aperture Science bunkers, so that humanity could go underground away from the aliens. And then by the time you beat Portal and you emerge to this empty world, it's because the aliens have actually went extinct. You know, it's that far in the future that the aliens have gone and the world's just kind of empty, and humanity's just the dregs of humanity are just living underground and going through these labs, these set up by different AIs like Gladys. That's the kind of fan theory. But yeah, there is Easter eggs and documents that in both games that pertain to each other. Like there's some Aperture Science leaflets in Half-Life, and there's some what are they called in Half-Life? What's the organisation called?
Oh, I can tell you.
Not Mensa, but Mensa's the real life one. But it's something like Mensa. There's references to organisations in both of the games. A Half-Life game I think could be interesting. People have been saying for years that Bryan Cranston would make a great Gordon Freeman.
Yeah.
Again, though, Gordon Freeman is another voiceless protagonist, so that's something you would have to consider.
He's also he looks too much like Walter White, so like
Heisenberg. Yeah,
it's too close to happen.
A bit obvious.
It's like in comic book films where like it's like at a certain point, fucking Jack Nicholson should have played Wolverine or Clint Eastwood, but like Jack Nicholson, I think, was maybe a little bit more believable because they were kind of breaching into comic book films while he was in his youth.
Yeah.
And he made Wolf, where he looked exactly like Wolverine, and he was often drawn like Wolverine. But it just it's one of those things that kind of makes too much sense.
Yeah.
To have. And I guess even that's, in my mind, I'm thinking now, like, Solid Snake, you never got to play a Solid Snake again. It's that kind of idea where an actor would fit the role perfectly, but it's just never going to happen. They're going to cast someone that you think is weird, like Robert Pattinson as Batman. It's like, it's never going to be the thing. Yeah.
Although we may be getting Willem Dafoe Joker, so that might change, because obviously for years he should be Joker, and there's rumours of that. And
was that more? He mentioned he'd like to play a Joker's impersonator
in the Joaquin Phoenix movies, which I'll take that. If that's as close as we can get, I'll take it, because Willem Dafoe Joker would be brilliant. Anyway, so Half-Life, I played the first one way back in the day, hardly remember it. Played the second one, and obviously changed a lot in gaming going forward. In terms of realistic physics being in a game, Half-Life 2 is kind of the granddaddy of that. It kind of done so much with that gravity gun.
Excuse me, is that the Half-Life engine?
Yes, the Half-Life engine, which of course spawned all sorts of fan games and all sorts of mods and all the rest of
it. Aren't games made with that engine? Not anymore, we've kind of gone past it now, but wasn't that engine used for a lot of games?
Well, Half-Life Alyx, the VR Half-Life game, which is the only one that I've not played, that came out a couple of years ago, and that is made in an advanced version of that old engine. So yeah, the old engine does exist, and it's just expanded to the point that it's able to use.
I just thought literally other games would have used that engine, like.
I mean, Team Fortress 2 was the same engine, and yeah, there was a bunch of games that I think in the PS2 era that also probably used that engine. Yeah.
Oh, I'm thinking of something else then. I picked that up wrong. I kind of just thought like a developer would come up with an engine for a certain game, and then that engine would just be used. Literally for lots of other games, like.
It's more a contractual basis, like Death Stranding. Death Stranding was made on the same engine as Horizon Zero Dawn, but that was because it was a contract signed by Kojima and Guerrilla Games to use. They would basically give them elements, like they would make a cardboard box or a wooden box, and then that for Death Stranding on the Horizon engine, but then if Horizon need a wooden box, they would just send it over and they can share assets. Basically, it means it's half the work for the team because they're collaborating on this one engine. They're building it together, kind of thing.
I'm not sure what concept I'm thinking of, but it was like
Unreal. You're probably thinking of
Unreal Engine.
That's the biggest one. Yeah, I mean the Unreal Tournament games were like kind of dynamic, fast-paced, first-person games back in the day, and then so much came on.
And how is it then that would different companies use the Unreal Engine?
Yes,
lots. Yes. Like literally.
Well, it's as we speak, it's now free. Unreal Engine is free. Anybody can download it and create your own game. You can build your own game in it, because that's just the point it's got to. But for years, it was something that was just used in the industry, kind of across the industry.
Well, would that have, say, like 30 games being made up from different companies?
Oh yeah, hundreds of games have been made on Unreal Engine.
Oh yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking of.
The Half-Life engine, not so much. I think there probably has a handful, but it was an iconic engine just because of how, at that time, the PS2 era, early 2000s, it was so realistic in terms of the physics. You could pick up, you could shoot a glass and then pick up individual shards of glass and fire it at monsters. And stuff that had never been done.
So we're going. If you're thinking of a film where you want it to have the physics to be on point.
Yeah.
In the action.
That's that off of the back of that portal. Obviously was made, and again, it's very physics based. Like you fire a portal, you fire another portal, and you jump through it, and depending on the speed that you're going through, as you travel through that portal, you'll go further or less far when you come out. So that's also very physics based. It's building up speed and momentum and stuff is a big element of that game, and it adds a whole extra dimension to the puzzles in Portal. Out of the two, see, Half-Life there's more of a story there, I think, already, and there's more of a expansive world to explore with Half-Life, whereas the Portal games primarily take place in these tight, small labs, and it's room, you go through one room and you come out in another room, and you just keep going and going and going until you reach the end. I think with Portal you would have to expand that into something wider. Talking about fan films, I remember seeing a Portal fan film on YouTube a few years ago that was really cool, and it was the character of Shell, the female character you play as in Portal. She was being chased by these government guys trying to stop her, these Aperture security guys. I think she stole the portal gun was the idea, and these guys are chasing her. And she fires a portal on the floor as she's running, right? She fires a portal on the floor, and then she runs past an open window, and there's a building across from her, a skyscraper, and she fires the other portal there. So the guy that's running behind her falls through the hole in the floor and falls out the side of that building to his death. And the other guy's like chasing, and she's having to dispatch guys that way, like, making them fall off buildings and whatever. I think that would be really interesting to explore in a game, but you would have to expand it beyond just this laboratory that the whole first and second game take place in, apart from the very end, where you get out, but that's just a cutscene. But I think if you made it more like kind of blended it with modern day stuff rather than being so sparse, like the Portal games, it is kind of part of the charm that it's so sparse. Like it does feel lonely. It's just you and this AI, or if you play it in co-op, you're playing as two robots, so there's no actual humans there, in the co-op version. So it is supposed to be a lonely kind of solitude experience. So I think to make it a movie, that would be a bit of a big ask to sit through an hour and a half, 2 hours of that. I think you would have to maybe expand it with other characters and stuff and make it more into our world, maybe.
Yeah. But I guess you have
it could still be interesting. Yeah, 100%. It's got those vibes.
Robot there, like the same kind of thing.
It's definitely got those vibes. Yeah. It doesn't say here whether any of these films are going to be live action or animated. As far as I know, the Portal movie. The Portal movie has been talked about since about 2014, and since then it has been pitched as a live action movie. So as far as I know, that will be live action, and I reckon Half-Life will be the same. But yeah, I mean they're iconic games, so I think you would need to do them justice as a movie, because I think if you don't, the fan backlash will be harsh, because there's a lot of neckbeards that like these games because they're Valve games. So I do think that there's probably quite a lot of pressure on these games, these adaptions. I think if they're bad, we will hear about it. I think people will be pissed off.
Yeah.
But yeah. The next one's a strange one. You spoke earlier about Wreck-It Ralph. I don't know if you played Firewatch.
No.
Firewatch. Well, see the list we're looking at, the background image, that's from Firewatch. But the art style was very Wreck-It Ralph. It was a first-person game where you were a Firewatch Firewatch house operator, who had to go and rescue somebody that was like buried or stuck somewhere. And there was only like 3 voice actors in the game. It was the guy you play as. There was a kind of coordinator person you spoke to on the radio who was voiced by a female, and there was a person you were going to rescue. And it was literally just those 3 characters. They made a film recently. A Taylor Sheridan movie came out recently with Angelina Jolie. What was that called? Came out towards the end of last year. Those Who Wish Me Dead, I think that's what it's called.
Oh, yeah.
And that she was a Firewatch person. That was her job in that. So when I seen Firewatch, I was like, they kind of made that movie last year already.
So is this more kind of like when you just from like Google Images here, like it's like I can't see the Wreck-It Ralph vibe.
If you look at the hands, it's mostly his hands.
Is that literally it? Yeah.
see when he's climbing stuff, he's got these big mitts that just look like Ralph's
mitts.
Okay,
so the rest, the actual environment is very kind of
the environment's quite lush and quite it's kind of like vibrant and quite I don't know, it's like a cool kind of colour spectrum thing and the kind of orange warm colours and stuff. But the character model itself is very Wreck-It Ralph.
Okay.
So yeah, but I downloaded that game and I played the first. It only takes you a couple of hours to beat. I played the first 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and was like, "That's okay, I'll go back to it," and then never went back to it. Not for any particular reason, just haven't.
Yeah, that happens.
But yeah, they're making that into a movie, which is a very story-based game. And I can see it maybe being like a Netflix movie at some point or something. I don't know. The other thing is these movies are all in development. It doesn't say who's developing them all. So I'm just going based on what I already know about these films. I'm not sure who's developing Firewatch, but I can see that being a kind of streaming movie. You know, I can see that coming to.
Could they do like a first-person film? Has that been done before? Sure, it has been smaller scale.
Hardcore Henry's all first person.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
Hardcore Henry was great, but it was very much kind of one and done. I don't really know where you go for there. The same guy that made Hardcore Henry went on to make Upgrade with Logan Marshall, which was
really the Saw guy too.
Lee Winnell, I think he wrote Upgrade, but I don't think he directed it. He did Invisible Man. Don't think he did it. Maybe I'm getting mixed up here. Hold on.
I'm just going by.
Let me fact check myself.
I'm just going by fucking Mr. Sunday Movies interviewing with Lee Winnell, and
Lee Winnell worked on all those projects, I'm sure, and I think he was
not the actor. I assumed he was like the writer director of Saw. Maybe he was just a producer.
He wrote it. Him and James Wan wrote Saw, and he's also in the first Saw.
Is Lee Winnell the guy? He's the kind of shorter guy who's not Patrick Wilson. There's a doctor guy.
Carrie Eulis. Sorry, I'm totally wrong. Ignore me. The guy that made Hardcore Henry went on to make Nobody with Bob Odenkirk.
Oh, okay.
The same guy that made Hardcore Henry made Nobody. Lee Winnell was a producer on Hardcore Henry. So yes, they have worked together, but Lee Winnell made Upgrade. I think. Am I right about that?
I watched it again. It's actually a great fucking film.
But yeah, I'm sure he did. I'm sure he made Upgrade and Invisible Man, and he was in Aquaman, which was a bit strange. He was the helicopter pilot.
Well, is he not the Saw? He's not the shorter guy in Saw. Who's like the 2 guys in Saw. There's like the guy who plays the doctor who was in Liar Liar.
Yes,
I could never take. Yeah. Is that his name? I could never take that guy serious after. He was very hard to believe.
He's in Princess Bride, and he's in Robin Hood Men in Tights.
I find him any film he's in. I just find him very hard to take seriously.
Yeah, well, he's in a new Guy Ritchie film. What's it called? Ruse to Care or something. And he is that kind of cheesy, posh English character in that. You know, he's kind of playing that up.
Do you know what it is? I think it's. I think he did the. In Liar Liar, he does the really hard to believe version of the
He was the other dad, Jerd.
Yeah, I'm the Claw, and then also in like Robin Hood, Prince and Types, it's so satirical that like anytime I see him in something, I just don't believe him. Like I'm always just thinking he's just taking the piss. Like
yeah,
I think he was probably because he was just so good in Robin Hood, Prince and Tights, or Men in Tights.
But yeah, so I'm getting Lee Manel mixed up with the guy that done Nobody. But yes, Hardcore Henry was a first person movie all the way through. It was an interesting experiment. It's not something that I don't know. I don't know if I would see it again.
Tough to watch. Yeah, I just kind of threw that out there because we've passed a lot of first person films, so I'm like, do you ever see those characters in full person in Firewatch?
I don't think so. I don't know for a fact because I've not.
Because that's a big step. If you're to do that as an animated film, that's a big step to do to show. Like if you only ever see their hands, that's a big kind of step to make to actually show them in full person. Then.
Yeah, 100%.
But and also, it's very gimmicky to do first person, like to do it especially for a whole film.
You also then need to decide on a character design and stuff. Whereas,
and I assume you do see the person you're rescuing.
Yes, I think you do.
You do see the purple like. Maybe it's not that big of a step then, but to see the lead character.
Now this is another game that does have lore elements to it, but it's very much an online shooter, so I don't know how you're going to adapt the Division into a movie. But they're apparently doing the Division. The Division as a Ubisoft kind of PvE game where you play this team, and it's very like Destiny. It's like doing raids and rinse and repeating missions and take over territory. It was one of those games that I watched the trailer and thought this looks phenomenal. The graphics look phenomenal, and again the physics look great. And then Ubisoft delayed it and delayed it and delayed it. And then when it eventually came out, the graphics didn't hold up to what they showed us. The physics didn't hold, doors. In the original trailer, I remember them shooting glass in a car window, and every bullet hole was breaking a different bit of glass. When you play the final game, you shoot a car window, the whole thing just falls. There's not that individual detail. So yeah, it was totally reduced to basically get it releasable. And then when it came out, it was an online kind of mass shooter, and I'm not interested in those games at all.
Yeah.
So even though I was interested in the world and the trailer looked cool, I bought the game. I did buy it, and I don't think I've ever even installed it. I think I own the hard copy, and I've never bothered to even boot it up. But yeah, they're making a movie, sure. I think Troy Baker's the lead character in Division, so he's pretty charismatic, I guess. So you've got a charismatic lead character to base your movies lead character off of. Oh yeah, he does. He gets a bit. Yeah, I don't have much else to say about that. I hope it's decent. It's military. I do think the universe is quite interesting because it's post-apocalyptic, but not in a way that's outlandish, in a way that is fairly realistic, because it's more of a militaristic.
There's a bit more pulled back.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's kind of like what could happen in the Ukraine at the minute in real life, which is kind of upsetting. But it's way more along those lines of like civil unrest and kind of the world's got to shit because of humans, not because of aliens or global warming or anything like that. It's our fault. Like we rich white guys made an arse of it, and now we need to deal with the aftermath. That is very much that vibe. And it is set, I think, in Washington. So it's set in kind of iconic American, political destinations and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just never got into it. But people that are into it love it, and they're making a movie. So yeah, hopefully it's good.
It's another thing then where it's kind of like depends who's fucking making it. Really, like you can make a very different type of film. Or
and
I still kind of feel that they kind of don't respect, like even in the way that they do with comic book films now, they don't respect games enough to. Any film that's based on a game, generally, like I guess I even though I think it was kind of shit, at least, but like Assassin's Creed was seemed to be attempted to be treated with respect. Like Fassbender was trying to make it his own franchise, I guess.
I think video game movies are very much in the same vein as horror movies in terms of the Oscars aren't ever going to recognise them. Same as superhero movies, I guess. They just don't get taken seriously by.
They might recognise them, but I feel generally. From apart from maybe like who made the Silent Hill film?
Who made it? I don't know the name of the director. I'm not sure.
Maybe I'm just thinking the fact that there was Hijo. Oh fuck, I can't say his name.
Guillermo del Toro and Hideo Kojima were doing the reboot. You mean?
No, Hideo Kojima. Saying that wrong, but I didn't like. I think they came up in the last pod we recorded that I didn't realize he actually made Silent Hill too. But you know what I mean, like. Horror films now, you will still get them made by real art house directors, like Hereditary, and real art house horror films are being made.
Yeah.
But I don't know if there's anyone really try and make game like? Does anyone have? Are game films always seen as really kind of popcorn films?
I think they have been up until now. I think the one that could change that is the HBO Last of Us adaptation that they're making, because it's the team that did Chernobyl, which was a really respected and grounded series. I think that team tackling this subject and this story could lead to, some serious recognition across the board. I think it's a bit more highbrow and a bit more.
Is that then the same team who made Succession, who also made Peep Show?
I'm not sure. Did they also work on Chernobyl?
Oh no, sorry. I think that one of the writers from Peep Show worked on Chernobyl, but also the guy who wrote Chernobyl, maybe the showrunner of Chernobyl, just wrote an awful lot of bollocks before, like just as like a job,
Right. Well, I think the showrunner is the guy that's doing Last of Us. I'm pretty sure. They share the same showrunner as Chernobyl. Anyway,
okay, yeah. Well, that's a game that's got so much merit as a creative.
Yeah. Well, at least the second one was shit. So hopefully it's more based on the first one. Cause I didn't enjoy that second.
Except that as that's kind of, we're breaking into TV shows then.
Yeah. So yeah, Firewatch Division. Next one's Five Nights at Freddy's. I mean, I guess this is for kids, right? Like,
I have no idea. When I seen that, and even when I googled it first, I thought it was that film Willy's Wonderland that Nicolas Cage was in.
Well, right, that's what I was thinking. I was like, did they, like we've said a few times here, have they not already made this movie? Was it not Willy's Wonderland? Like the whole, which
I thought was shit, to be honest with you.
I never seen Willy's Wonderland, and I've never really played a Five Nights at Freddy's game, but I know enough about that franchise that when I saw the trailer for Willy's Wonderland, I was like, oh, that looks like a Five Nights at Freddy's game. So the fact that it's getting its own movie, I think that is just pure
just a murder teddy bears, like animatronics in a fun.
Honestly, it's evolved beyond to God knows where. I don't know what the latest one function as. It started off. I do give credit to whoever made it, because it was made for no money. It was a pure ground grassroots indie game, and it was as basic as there was a bit of voiceover at the start, and you were the security guard, and you had to basically watch over this animatronic warehouse at night time.
Sounds like the exact same thing.
And the animatronic robots are all possessed and haunted and stuff. So the literal gameplay was you switching between cameras. So you had camera 1, 2, I think you had camera 1 through 8, and they all focused on a different part of the warehouse, and you had to follow the characters, and make sure they weren't getting too close to where you were, because you had a room on the map that you had to keep them away from, and you did that by like switching the power on and off and opening and closing doors. So it was all just kind of like you sitting in front of this control panel, and all you could do was put the power on and off, close and open some doors, and switch between cameras, and you had to keep these animatronic robots. You would see them running towards you, and you would have to be like, shit, close that gate, open this one, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then if the character gets too close, and that's when you get the jump scare, then blah, your face and whatever. How they're going to make that in a game, I don't know, and in a movie, I don't know. And as you said, I feel like they already attempted it with Willy's Wonderland, and
I don't know.
By all accounts, it wasn't great.
That Nicolas Cage film was terrible. Like, Nicolas Cage doesn't even speak for the whole film, and he just keeps like, when these robots tries to attack him, he just kills it. It bleeds.
Right.
It stays there. Then he doesn't bleed. Like, he just like waits and like no meant like because because the character, like, speaking of characters who don't speak, he just goes back like he's tricked into cleaning the place.
Right.
By the people, because I think they want to steal his car, but basically that's why he's just there. Like, we fixed your car, but you need to pay for it. It's like, I don't even think he's able to say he doesn't have money because he's mute, I think.
Okay.
So he just cleans the place, and then he gets like every couple of scenes he gets attacked by one of these animatronic robots, and then he kills it, and then he just stays there and continues cleaning. Like, it's just. And then there's these like teen characters that come into it, and like they start to get picked off one by one, but like.
Right.
There's just nothing to it. Like, it's just
so strange.
It's kind of an idea, but I guess if people seen it now, they'd be like I know that Nicolas Cage film didn't do gangbusters. Like, it wasn't everywhere, so maybe people wouldn't be fucking tainted by it. But there's also that stupid thing of like studios just taking up ideas and like going, oh no, this was out, and like, but there's evidence of it too for like the Dread coming out at the same time as the Raid films.
Yeah.
People, it didn't get a look in, but like, I guess maybe kind of like towards the end of this now, like, why is it that games can't get made that well? Is it as simple as like the same way comic books weren't treated with respect? That's why we didn't get good ones for so long.
Possible.
But like, I think there was a shorter period of time. Like maybe games are only newer. They've only tried to really start to make computer game films since the 90s. So like, Superman comics, comics are a longer art form. So like, Superman came out in the 70s.
They have longer to get it right, I guess. Yeah.
Batman came out in the late 90s. Then, like, so we basically had 40 years of people trying to make superhero films before they actually gave them a shot.
Yeah.
And like, in the 90s when they were making like, it's funny because the guy who made the Spider-Man, I'm rewatching the 90s Spider-Man cartoon, and I follow the guy who like the main head showrunner, and he's like, I don't know, he's very, I'm in the Spider-Verse first, and like from watching the cartoon, he's like, well, he's kind of right, but he's being so whiny about it, like.
Yeah.
But like from his point of view, he was like, Avi Arad was trying to get people interested in making films about superheroes when no one gave a fuck about them, like, and they were treated as trash, like even these guys who were making the cartoons, like that was their main kind of like sizzle reel type information, like this is what it could be, but that was the only tool they had to try and show studios how good superhero films could be. But so there was a much longer fight to get superhero films in cinemas on a more like to get where we are now, where like they're greenlighting them fucking left, right, and center, and people are dying to get as many out as they can, and they're $1 billion deals. Games haven't been. It just seems like studios are fucking dumb, like, and they're like, we can't. And like, but like, I think the fans kind of propagate this as like, oh well, superhero films are shit, or computer game films are shit, but like, just keep making them, or put more creative teams behind them. And I guess we're getting to a stage where the people making these decisions are getting like, maybe just that's what we have to wait for. The money making people, or the money people with the money, have to get to an age where they understand what a computer game is and how good it can be. So maybe we're just banging our heads against the wall, but I'd say we're probably on the cusp of it, like it's getting close.
But when you look at pop culture though, I mean, look at the last 10 years, it's all been 80s nostalgia, Stranger Things, the reboot, all these kind of Stephen King callbacks and stuff. It's been very recreating all of that stuff. The Expendables was also a callback to kind of 80s action movies. There's a lot of stuff that's come out in the last 10 years that's kind of been people that obviously grew up with that. Now the next 10 years it's going to be, you would think it would be people that grew up with Metal Gear Solid and with Zelda and with the kind of that kind of era pop culture. I think we'll kind of. And I think we will start seeing more callbacks to that stuff because, as you're saying, that's just the way it ages.
We just have to wait for the
we
just have to wait for the us to be in power, basically. So, like,
the next one is a strange one. Just Dance. They're making a Just Dance movie. I assume that'll just be like a step up or a.
Yeah, there's not much to that.
Yeah, sure. Okay. I don't know how much there is to say.
I kind of forgot to say this for Metal Gear Solid, but just to jump back. They should have, ideally, it should be an online, well, no. If it was like a series that was on Netflix or something, there has to be an interactive part where you have to, no, because then it's on Netflix. Like, the code is in the description. So you literally have to go back out of Netflix, find the code in the description, put it in somewhere, and then you get to watch the next episode.
Or, if you're in the cinema, you could have it where like there's an in-joke or like a clue or something in the movie that they don't ever actually give you an answer to, but maybe on your ticket there's like something that points you to what the answer actually is. Like in the small print underneath your ticket, there's like the small print at the bottom, but it tells you, I don't know, a codec number or just an
or just something you can look up on your phone, maybe like a post-credit scene on your phone.
Yeah.
Because they can't get the projectionist to stop it, and then like you have to wait until someone figures it out. And then it's done every time the film is on. So it's like, okay, we're here for like half an hour now. But they could do some kind of like I mean, one of my very cliche like short films about depression, but like I had a bit where it just cuts to black. Just do shit like that. Like that's a very effective piece. of filmmaking. You know, maybe something like Solid Snake's just being bombed by something, and he's just like cut the black. Sorry, don't jump way back there. But
we mentioned 1917 earlier. There was a scene like that in 1917. Anyway, the very last one we're on here is Dragon's Lair. I had to look up Dragon's Lair to remind myself what it is. It was one of those games that you kind of played certain parts of it 2D, kind of early Zelda-ish, and then you would have like a 3D cutscene, but a 3D cutscene, you would have a cartoon.
2D cartoon, I've seen that, I've never played it, but I was like, I don't know what that is, and then as soon as you said that, I'm like, I've seen
again, it I think that's a bit before our time. I think that was more like in the arcades and stuff. But Ryan Reynolds is talk about Ryan Reynolds voicing video game characters. He is in talks to play the knight in the movie. So yeah,
it's kind of make it whatever you want, really. In that case, well, I guess in fairness to him, what was it called? What was the
game? Detective Pikachu. No,
the most recent thing, the kind of basic GTA.
Free Guy.
Yeah, like he's Ryan Reynolds in that, but it's not like his normal stuff, kind of.
Yeah.
Like he plays a more mild-mannered character. Like it's not like his character is like fucking what's it, NCP. So like he doesn't really have much of a personality in it. So like anyone could have really played that part.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like that wasn't like. That's not to say that like he basically just made a GTA game, but he wasn't relying on his usual Ryan Reynolds. I guess he has that kind of like. A certain part of his performances where he's not exactly speaking foul, but he speaks in a very. His voice can play characters who are very mild mannered easily. I think.
Yeah.
When needed to be, and like not when he has to be Deadpool, but I guess because he's Canadian. I don't know. He's very polite.
Yeah,
but as I say, he fits. It's not a very Ryan Reynolds character, but it's not a million miles away from anything. He's not stretching his acting abilities to play that character because he just plays a very. I feel like a lot of his characters come across that way too. Like he's played character. Like what was the one where he did the "Do a happy song, do a happy"? The one where he's playing the voices in his head. His voices in his head. He's like a murderer. It's like a weird kind of indie film.
No, not seen it.
No, okay. But like I get that's something like where he could just be himself or play like a very loose version of himself.
Yeah. But with that Dragon's Lair one, that's us hit the bottom of the list. Before we'll wrap up soon because we've been going for nearly 3 years, believe it or not.
This is like we're really hitting Joe Rogan territory now. Sort of this is in 4 hours now, no?
But just before we go, we were going to kind of sum up and say, out of everything we've spoken about, is there any of these that you're particularly looking forward to that you really want to kind of work out? For the best?
I think it's probably the same as yourself.
What's that?
Metal Gear Solid.
Metal Gear Solid. See, I'm going to kind of split it into two because I think Metal Gear Solid. Yes, I will be devastated if we've waited this long for a Metal Gear Solid movie and it's shit. I think it would be a real letdown. But I think in terms of if I had to bet on one of these being great, I think it would be BioShock. If I had to what one day I think has the best chance of working, I would say BioShock. I think Metal Gear Solid is more risky as an adaptation than BioShock is.
Well, like we have Escape from New York, which is essentially a Metal Gear Solid film.
Yeah,
and that's gonna very proven like. I think it's where something like that would come into it. It was people getting in the way of themselves, thinking, "Oh, well, we can't." But like, Metal Gear Solid is it's Ghost in the Shell and it's Escape from New York.
Yeah.
Like, I only seen and the funny thing was I don't even think I planned it. I seen Ghost in the Shell and Escape from New York within about 2 months of each other, and I didn't even cop how much both of them are Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah.
So like,
100%. It's
literally like then if you think about it, like Star Wars, even though obviously that's been very hit or miss in the last couple of years, Star Wars is eats me sweats. It's like it's both Eastern and like the samurai shit, and it's got the fucking gunslinger shit.
Yeah.
That's what both of those things are. So like, it's basically just I think if as long as they're not getting in the way of themselves, Metal Gear Solid could do absolutely like, because it is so cinematic, and I think it's one of those things where, yes, it's kind of more of the same. I think it could totally work. I don't think it's that risky.
I really hope so. I hope you're right. I think I'm just so trepidatious because it is Metal Gear Solid is one of my favourite pieces of media ever. So there is quite a lot kind of riding on it in that sense for me.
Riding.
Right. Whereas like Bioshock, I don't have as much of an affinity for. Although I did enjoy those games, I didn't. They're not an integral part of my pop culture. In the same way Metal Gear Solid is. It's kind of so ingrained in my childhood and stuff. So yeah, I do. If I had to kind of choose, if it was you were granted a wish that you can make any one of these a perfect movie, it would be Metal Gear Solid. But you don't have that ability. You just have to see what happens. So based on that, I think I'm most looking forward to Bioshock, just because I think that's more of a dead cert. Maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe they'll make a total arse of Bioshock. It'll be shit. I don't know.
Bioshock could be like, I can't see it being as big of a like Metal Gear Solid, even though Blade Runner 2049 didn't do that well. That could be the guts of a Metal Gear Solid film.
Yeah.
You can treat it that way. You can go that high class with it. Obviously, it wasn't the best financially or whatever, but Bioshock, I think, would have to be a smaller kind of indie release. You're not going to get because it's so weird. It's like it's going to be like it's either going to be like. What is it going to be? It's going to be an indie horror, really, Bioshock. Indie horror genre.
Shape of Water won Best Picture at the Oscars, and that's very Bioshock.
Is it? I never seen
it. Oh yeah, Shape of Water is very Bioshock. I mean, the aesthetic of the whole environment and the whole tone of it, the fact that it's an underwater creature, and it's in Bioshock you're in an underwater city. The whole steampunky nature is there in Shape of Water. The fact that there's stuff being hidden, there's that kind of almost mystery espionage side to it as well, behind the scenes going on. The fact that there's more to this. It's not just a monster movie, or same way that Bioshock's not just a horror game. There's kind of more political stuff being said behind the scenes, and there's a lot of DNA shared between Shape of Water and Bioshock. Get Gilmore, I think it was solid. I don't think Gilmore will do it because he's kind of already done it with Shape of Water, but yeah, I'm excited to see it anyway. If I had to pick a one that I was least looking forward to, it would probably be the Five Nights at Freddy's adaptation, because
I could probably pick I could nearly take all of the probably most of them from both lists. I'd be like, I don't want to watch that. I don't want to watch that. I don't want to watch that.
So that was our take on the movies coming out that are based on video games. We are not going to do TV shows today because we have already went for 3 years, and I'm hungry.
I'm starving. I've been seeing stars for the last half an hour. I'm just like, I need to eat and stop talking about fucking films that I don't want to see.
But if you happen to listen to this full episode, you deserve a prize. Well done for getting through that.
An achievement, should we say?
Achievement unlocked. Platinum trophy and all that shit.
Some gold coins or gold rings, gold coins.
Disclaimer: I'm not going to send you any gold coins because I don't have anything. I don't have any myself, so you're certainly not getting any of mine.
These are just Mario ones, 2D, not really.
I'll send you a photo of some coins, right? I'll send you a JPEG, just some Mario coins.
New Game Plus. I don't know. I'm just trying to fucking any phrase.
Right. We will be back next week. I
meant to just hold this while I was talking for the whole time, trying I kind of brought it over to the desk as I was starting. I was going to I'll just do this because I was like
that. We will be back talking about something probably not video game related next week. But when these projects drop, we will probably be mentioning them on the podcast. When these come out, after they're any good.
We'll review Metal Gear Solid for definite, and
100%. And I would like to do, if you're up for it, maybe at some point do a fan casting for the rest of the cast for that movie. I think that could be fun to talk about who we would like to be Colonel Campbell and Meadow.
I definitely
stuff like that.
Considering myself and yourself, and I'm pretty sure someone else when we were doing our intros at the very start of our recording pods, Metal Gear Solid came up a lot. So I'd be very happy for in the lead up to that. Well, I guess we can't do the fan casting before. We have to do the fan casting before the casting comes out. Maybe if some other big news comes, I would definitely be happy to become a Metal Gear Solid podcast for the couple of weeks in the lead up to it.
Yeah,
we could like replay the games, talk some shit about them.
Yeah, that sounds great. Do a wee recap. Always up for that. But yes, thanks for joining us. Pop Shot Podcast. Give us a like, a subscribe, a comment, share us. Subscribe to the YouTube and the podcast feeds. Because we're probably going to launch all these at the same time. I don't know our launch plan yet because we're recording this way before we've launched anything. But
they'll be there. Yeah,
we'll communicate that through social media.
We're speaking from the past, but to the future. So I'm sure our social medias. I think we may have secured that already, but we're just going to record like a. After this, there's going to be like a recording that's going to play over all the podcasts.
Yeah,
we'll get there. We've got there already, so this is like this is the origin story of our end tag. I don't know.
Right. All the best. Let's wrap up. See you next week. See you in the next page, as Massimo would say.